Good evening. Call the order. We have a quorum. Could we have the roll call, please, Weston?
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Sticks.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Francina.
Here.
Councilmember Rule.
Here.
Councilmember Lang.
Here.
Councilmember Whitman.
Here.
Thank you, Weston, and welcome everyone to the June 27th, 2023 meeting of the Ojai City Council. Weston, will you please do the pledge for us?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you.
Everyone please stand. Right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Weston. Approval of the agenda? Motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all right. Well, we will move on to presentation. We have the presentation of the proclamation honoring outgoing Parks and Rec Commissioner of 8 years, Ryan M. Firestone. Thank you for being here. Louise.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, council members, Mr. City Manager, Mr. City Attorney, Chief Newman, Ms. Greer, Interim Deputy City Clerk. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. For those in the audience who may not know who I am, my name is Luis Gomez. I'm the Recreation Manager here for the City of Ojai. I would like to begin by expressing my gratitude for the continued support of the department from the city, our residents, and our visitors. It's an honor to serve our community in this capacity and one we take with great pride at the department. We are proud of our parks, recreation offerings, and facilities as they provide safe, open spaces for our residents to enjoy and recreate with their family and friends. Part of the reason why we have such great parks and recreation programs and facilities is through valuable input from our Parks and Recreation Commission. And it is input from commissioners such as Commissioner Firestone that have helped shape and develop our recreation offerings. In recent months, I've had the opportunity to work with Mr. Firestone as staff liaison to the Parks and Recreation Commission, as well as staff support to the Ad hoc Committee on Pickleball. While working with Mr. Firestone in this capacity, I've really been taken back by his professional demeanor. In his work, he is diligent, thorough, and most importantly, equitable in his thought process and input. Mr. Firestone, on behalf of the Department and Commission, it has been a privilege working with you during this time. Your contributions have really helped preserve our park's special character, and we thank you for your service. I know I can speak for a lot of us when I say you will be missed, and at the same time, we're excited for you and your new endeavors overseas. So thank you. Thank you. For those that may be interested in programs and offerings made available through the Recreation Department, we invite you to come visit us over at the department. Alternatively, you can also visit the website to explore the variety of enrichment programs and offerings that we have available to our community. We always work to develop our recreation offerings and welcome the community's feedback on any programs that they'd like to go ahead and see run through the department itself there. With that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Firestone, who would like to share some words as well.
First of all, thank you, Luis. That was very kind. Still, after all these years, still nervous coming up here. Thank you, Mayor Sticks, and the rest of the council and former council members. It's been an honor and a pleasure to serve Ojai on the Parks and Recreation Commission for the past 8 years. I was relatively new to Ojai when I joined the commission. I started right when we were getting started on the Libby Park Playground project. And my son was a baby at the time. So it's been a great way to get to know Ojai and be integrated in the community. I appreciate the interest and the attention that the council and the community have given to our parks and our recreation department. And I'd also like to recognize Luis, our staff liaison, who makes a lot of that kind of come together and happen. Finally, I encourage all of you to digest and act on our commission's pickleball recommendations. That's a lot.
With that, we'll have our mayor read a proclamation for Ryan.
Thank you. And I would just like to thank you, Ryan, for your dedication. 8 years is a lot of service, a lot of binders to read. And I've always appreciated your calm and compassionate demeanor and your thoughtfulness and your critical thinking skills. So we're going to miss you. You're exactly what we need on our commissions, and the city's grateful. And nice that you guys grew up and got to use the park, right? Lucky. Okay, proclamation. Whereas, we are here today to express our gratitude and appreciation to Ryan Firestone for his dedicated service to the city of Ojai and the Ojai community while serving on the city's Parks and Recreation Commission. And whereas, the Parks and Recreation Commission advises the City Council on all matters related to parks and recreation, including parks, playgrounds, recreation facilities, programs, community sports, and other recreational activities. And whereas, Mr. Firestone was first appointed to the Parks and Recreation Commission on April 28, 2015, and during this tenure served in various capacities, including commission chair, commissioner, and ad hoc committee member, all in addition to volunteering his time to serve as a coach for the 5v5 youth soccer program. Wow, that's a lot. Whereas, Mr. Firestone has played a vital role to the Parks and Recreation Commission in providing valuable and equitable input on various parks and recreation projects to better benefit the city's recreation resources, such as the Libby Park Playground Renovation Project, the Sarasota Master Plan, the Skate Park Lighting Project, and most recently serving on the Pickleball Ad Hoc Committee. And whereas, Parks and Recreation are important in establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our community while ensuring the health of all Ojai residents. And whereas, the City of Ojai recognizes the benefits derived from Parks and Recreation resources in addition to the contributions made by Mr. Firestone as Commissioner. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that I, Betsy Sticks, Mayor of the City of Ojai, and on behalf of the Ojai City Council, do hereby commend Ryan M. Firestone on an outstanding tenure with the City of Ojai's Parks and Recreation Commission and wish him many years of happiness, good health, and prosperity.
We'll ask those in the crowd and those watching to give us a brief moment for a photo opportunity. We'll have the council members, please stand right behind the dais. We'll have.
Have the kids. What about the kids?
Mayor Pro Tem, if you could scoot over this way a little. Please do.
What about the kids and the mother?
Let's get one with just Mr. Firestone, and then we'll get the whole family. Councilmember Whitman, if I could have you.
He's getting me out of the picture.
John Zide. Thank you very much. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Would you like to get the whole family in?
Yeah.
Should we do something athletic?
All right, that looks great. 1, 2, 3. All right. Okay, thanks everyone.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
And this senior year.
That's so nice. I remember son was a baby. So time goes by.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here, too. Congratulations. All right, we will move on to commission reports. We have an Arts Grants Commissioner Freeman is going to talk about arts grants.
Good evening. I'm Valerie Freeman, Arts Commissioner, and thank you, City Council, for all you do. I'm so excited to announce that the Arts Grants application is now available online to download. Ojai Arts Commission is accepting applications for 2024 arts grants awarded each year by the Ojai City Council in December to help ensure the vitality of the arts in the Ojai Valley. The program funds nonprofit arts organizations and individual artists whose primary purpose is to produce or present arts and cultural programs in the city of Ojai. The art grants are made for 1 year. The goals of the Arts Grants programs aims to foster artistic excellence, develop new audiences for the arts, promote cultural diversity, and encourage artistic activities, community partnerships, and collaboration. Priority consideration will be given to applicants with emphasis on the Ojai Arts Commission core values: innovation, inclusivity, impact, educational, mentorship, heritage, and the environment. Funding will be capped at $5,000 per applicant, and microgrants of $2,500 or less are encouraged. The application deadline is September 22nd of this year by 4 p.m., and you may mail or hand deliver the application and materials here to City Hall. For more information, please email artgrant@ojai.gov.ca, and to download the application, you go to the city's website, and it's right there. You can't miss it. And I would like to thank fellow art commissioners and city staff for bringing the updated Arts Grants application to be available online. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Much appreciated. All right, we will move on to public communication. So just a reminder to the public, these are items not on the agenda, and because they're not on the agenda, we cannot discuss them. We appreciate your viewpoint and your participation, and we can agendize those for the future. And at the end of your 3 minutes, you'll hear a chime as a reminder that your time is up. So please respect each other's time, and in the spirit of equity, stop talking when the chime sounds. So we'll begin with Bennett, Colette, and Asher. Then we have Wayne Maynard, and then we have Renee Roth.
My name is Bennett, and I live off Ojai Avenue, and fast cars come down my street all of the time. I ask for cars go slower on neighborhood streets so kids can be safe. Maybe a new speed limit or speed bumps. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Colette, and I live off Ojai Avenue, and people drive really fast down my street, and I think you should change the speed limit to 15. Ow. Ow. Why? Oh, sir. Yeah, no.
Say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bennett, Colette, and Asher. Much appreciated.
Can I ask a question? Hey, Daddy, Mister, I want to ask a question. Come back. How do we get him back?
Can we have a question from a council member?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't want to let this opportunity go by. What you've brought up is one of the single most important
Microphone, please.
issues for this city. What you've brought up about the speed limit. I would like to see a citywide 25 miles per hour speed limit and lower on narrow streets. It's way past time to do that. By speaking out, you're probably going to save the life of someone's life by speaking out. It's so important. But you said that you lived off Ojai Avenue. Can I know the name of your street that you live in? On?
Fulton Street.
What?
Fulton.
Do you live on South or North Fulton? Maybe your dad can tell us. North Fulton. Okay, we're going to remember that street. We're going to look at it. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Wayne Maynard and then Renee Roth.
Good evening, Council. My name is Wayne Maynard, a resident of Ojai, and I emailed you a document earlier today. I don't know, probably didn't have a chance to look at it, but I'm just going to read the first few paragraphs of that, so hopefully you can look at it later after the meeting. But I have a strong belief that the public business needs to be done in an open and transparent manner. And I see the purpose of our city commissions is to utilize the commissioners' experiences while engaging with the community to conduct public business on behalf of the city. This is best accomplished by a commission acting as a whole, where all commissioners have input on all commission business and that business is conducted in public view. There's no doubt that all our city commissioners are dedicated volunteers looking out for the best interests of the city. However, I'm concerned that the Arts Commission has organized themselves in a manner that, rather than acting as a whole, the commission chair has assigned each commissioner an area of responsibility that reports directly back to the chair. Like a wheel, with the chair as the center hub, the commissioner is a spoke and responsible for individual assignments. Under this organization, the Arts Commission business is no longer open and subject to public input, review, scrutiny, and very susceptible to Brown Act violations. There are two recent examples that demonstrate how this process has been working. The current Art Commission budget and the request for the current budget request and the 5-year plan. According to the Commission's March 16th meeting minutes, each of these topics were to be set as future agenda items. That never occurred. The Commission, without a public meeting, commission vote, or public input, produced a budget request that went to the city budget process and a multiple-page 5-year plan that was presented by the chair as a handout to City Council. The 5-year plan is still not easily accessible by the public. I suspect that each commissioner submitted a budget request and a 5-year plan proposal for their assigned areas of responsibility to the chair, who then combined the information into a commission report. That process may be convenient, streamlined, and efficient perhaps, but the decisions and recommendations have been made without public input or commission public discussion, and perhaps are Brown Act violations as well. A look at the most recent agenda from June 15th demonstrates how the Arts Commission limits public input and keeps each commissioner within their lanes of responsibility. All business is covered by commissioner updates rather than discussion items. This process allows the chair to limit discussion between commissioners because it's a report, not discussion. The public has no opportunity to comment on business of the commission except for the public comments at the beginning of the meeting before any reports are given. Not a very open or transparent way of conducting business. And I'm out of time, but I have a recommendation that's in the email I sent you on how I think you can make revisions to solve that.
Thank you, Wayne. Renee Roth?
Good evening, City Council members and James, wherever you are. I can't see you now. I want to thank our Ryan Firestone as a member for 8 years of the Park and Rec Committee and his recommendations and working on a plan for the pickleball people. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that has been a big contentious issue in our community, and I would like to see some action taken on that project. I'm also wanting to rethink a little bit, and I don't know if it was considered, about Matilaha. And I know the pickleball people aren't going to support this, but that's okay. We all need to speak what we believe is good for our community. Using Matilaha Junior High, which is going to be vacant all summer long and for how many years into the future. We have no idea what those great tennis courts are going to be used for. That's an underutilized resource. Who and how can members of our community work with the school district? Wouldn't it be great to see us working together on something like this? I also want to thank our citizen advocates for slowing down our speed limits in our town. I cannot underestimate how important this is that you came here today and spoke up about this. I personally know of 4 people in our community who have died while crossing the streets or as a result of crossing the streets in our town. I was recently at a brainstorming session where they brought up the city of Port Townsend, Washington. Port Townsend, Washington is a very small town, 6 square miles, They changed citywide the speed limit to 25 miles per hour, citywide on all city streets. And by the sound of things, it's made a huge impact on the safety, the rideability, the walkability of their town. I would love to see us do something bold and brave to do something for our community members, and I can't think of anything better than to slow everybody down. And James, I want to say thank you. I don't know if I'm going to have a chance to say goodbye. With a heavy heart, I'm saying goodbye. I'm really sorry to see you go. You have done an amazing job for our city. Our streets are much safer over off of Maricopa Highway across from Nordhoff High School. I still have issues, but you have done an amazing job for our city, and I want to thank you and be the first to thank you and wish you well in Port Hueneme.
Thank you, Renee. Any comments online, Weston?
No raised hands, Mayor.
Okay, wonderful. All right, we will move on to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, in a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye? Okay,
Aye.
great. All right, let's move on to the public hearing. This is item number 2, the fiscal year 23-24. So that's July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2024, budget adoption and salary schedule approval. And thank you so much to Pam Greer, our finance director, and city manager James Vega for working so hard on this. And you did it. They said it couldn't be done, but you did it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And we have a short presentation. I know we've had a few workshops, so we aren't going to belabor it again. I think one of our first workshops was over an hour of us talking, so we're going to try to avoid that this meeting. So we'll pull up our PowerPoints here, and I'll start just by noting, yes, I am appearing virtually. I'm actually had the opportunity to represent the city at our California Joint Powers Insurance Authority Academy today, and at one point thought I could get out at 5 and drive back to Ojai for the meeting, and realized that wasn't going to work out driving from San Diego. So, thanks for allowing me to participate virtually. If at any time you can't hear me or anything, please let me know, because I'm operating a little differently here. But so James, can you pull up the presentation? Again, we'll try to keep this brief here. Let's see. James, are you going to show the?
Yeah, I'm trying to get it to the beginning.
Okay.
Yes, James, it's up on the screen in council chambers.
Okay. All right, it's not showing as a slideshow, but all right, well, let's go ahead and show it. James, can you go to the second slide? James?
Second slide is up.
My screen is showing slide 3.
Yes. They're kind of numbered.
So is it the one with a budget summary, general fund?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so are you guys are able to see it? Just not me, I guess.
Now it's correct.
Yeah, that's
No,
good,
it's
James.
Okay, there we go. Okay. All right, so somehow I'm not the one having technical difficulty, which surprises me. I thought I would be the one struggling. Okay, we'll just make it work. It's not quite working, but so this year for our budget, we've gone through this several times, so nothing should be very surprising. The last time we presented it, there was it was sort of the first round of review, and I think the summary that you're going to see in the next couple of slides is that revenues recovered after COVID, which was good news, but they've been flat since. And as we all know, just like our home budgets, costs keep going up, expenses keep going up, everything gets more expensive. So it's good that we've recovered, but every year that our revenues stay flat and our costs go up, it means more and more of a squeeze on our budget. So this year, on the first round of the budget review, we came to council and we showed basically a $200,000 deficit. And we noted some areas where we could make some reductions that wouldn't impact our services to get to a balanced budget. And we've gone back after that discussion with council and we've made those changes. So we are presenting a balanced $14.9 million budget, 14.9 million in revenues and 14.9 million in expenditures. As you can see, the chart shows sort of the trend that during COVID, our revenues had dropped significantly down to about the $10 million range. They recovered right after COVID to 14.8 million, but they've essentially kind of flatlined there. I think one of the challenges we've talked about, just being realistic about Ojai, is that we don't have unlimited capacity in Ojai. So there, other than the Roblar opening up potentially at the end of this budget year, there's not more capacity opening up to really cause revenues to increase. So I think that our revenues will be fairly flat moving forward, with just probably a bump when the Roblar opens up. And so what that means is it's good news in a way, because our budget's recovered and it's fairly strong. But the challenge is we have to now figure out how to keep our costs within those revenues, because the revenues probably aren't going to go up in coming years, or not significantly. The other, just a couple of key points. The general fund, this is the general fund budget. The general fund is the fund that's used to fund our core administrative and operational tasks. The two biggest costs that the city has in any given year is our staffing costs and our police contract. So providing the staff to do our public works projects, to do or to staff our community development department, and then, like I said, the police contract. Between those two chunks, that's about 2/3 of our budget, about $10 million. So we have the money to do the basic things we need. We just have to be careful and disciplined to stay within our budget. The last bullet point on this slide shows Measure C. Measure C is not in the general fund, so it's a $3 million restricted fund outside of the general fund. But that is the hotel tax increase that is going to allow us to do our paving and our environmental projects. So again, that was adopted in 2020. And I think now that we've gotten through COVID, we're seeing the impact it has. And we'll talk about the streets a little later in this presentation to show what impact it will have in the future years. Next slide, James. Okay. Are you able to hear me? Everything went blank on my screen for a minute there.
Yes, we are.
We're good. It's good.
Okay. So the next slide shows the tax revenue trends. Again, just kind of reiterating what I said earlier, and this trend I thought was helpful in showing. Tax revenues make up most of our revenues, particularly the hotel tax. Ojai is kind of unique in that way. There's I think we're the only city in the county where hotel tax makes up a majority of our revenue. And this chart shows that a couple of key points. One is it shows that recovery after COVID and the spike. But then if you look from 21 to 24, every revenue is just a flat line. And so we recovered coming out of COVID, but there's not unlimited growth potential. And so for us, it's just, like I said, the reminder that, I think for a while we thought, well, our revenues are going up so fast, they're just going to keep going up. And the reality is they've gone up and we're at capacity. And these are the cities likely about the revenue level moving forward. Things like property tax don't change very quick. Sales tax and hotel tax are more volatile, but I think they're about maxed out. And the thing that we have to be careful of is more likely a recession where they would drop rather than expecting an increase. So all just kind of general principles for us to keep in mind and why we budget conservatively and why we are careful and built up our reserve fund in Ojai because of that situation. Can you move to the fourth slide, James? So we wanted to show some of the major expenses when people look at our budget and say, well, where does $15 million go? Like how did we spend all that money? And so we wanted to walk through some of the basic expenses of what's paid for in the general fund. Major expenses include our staffing, which are budgeted at $5.8 million this year. Police services budgeted at $3.4 million. Utilities are a couple $100,000. And then one thing we've focused on increasing year over year is our maintenance budgets. I think when I arrived in Ojai, we pretty frequently used to talk about fixing things like the slides at the park, and we'd say there wasn't money to do it. And so we've really put an emphasis in trying to make sure we have the money to maintain our streets, our facilities, and our parks. And so those are increased in our budget to about $500,000 this year, up from $280,000 a couple years ago. And then just a side note, that doesn't include the paving project, which is actually paid for from other funds. And so this is additional maintenance on top of street paving. And then there's transfers to our capital improvement projects, equipment and vehicle replacement funds, and at $775,000, and recreation programming is about $187,000. So just these expenses alone total about $10.9 million, more than 2/3 of our general fund budget. And so you can see very quickly how, you start with a pot of about $15 million, and with just these core services, a lot of that funding is taken up. And the next slide shows a couple of other costs. One thing we talked about earlier, and I appreciate Councilmember Rule's comments, because the point I was trying to make was not being critical of the HPC's requests. It is just trying to remind everybody that every time an item comes on that we have not planned for, there's only one pot of money right now that those things can come from. And that's the contingencies budget. This year, it's included in the budget at $400,000. And last year, we had the highest ever contingency budget at $550,000, partially because we knew that there were some litigation issues and things like that coming up that we weren't sure about, so we didn't have them as separate line items in the budget. But we ended up using up almost all of that budget. And so next year, we will have a lower budget for that category, and we will have to be careful not to overspend. I think that HPC item was a pretty good example of whenever we get a request, and we've gotten several in the last couple of months, we get a request for funding from a community group, for example, and on its own, they all look great, and they all look like great things, and they all have benefits to the community. And so you want to support them all. But the reality is we have a limited pot of money. And so we have to, every time one of those comes in, we have to think about this request with the other requests and which ones are the true priorities. And so that was the point I was trying to make with the HPC item. And it's just something that we should be going through that exercise whenever a request comes in. But in this year's budget, there is a contingency budget of $400,000. And there are some items coming up that will impact that budget that will be brought forward to the council in coming months. The other notable items in the budget, the attorney services budget, we have under budgeted that over the last couple of years, and with some of those same laws still pending, we increased the budget just to match the real costs so that we're not constantly overspending our budget. And so that's been increased from $296,000 to $398,000 in this budget. We've also included the Ojai Museum's funding in the budget, $60,000. The Arts Commission funding in the budget, $46,300. And as one note on that, Commissioner Freeman's comments about the Arts Commission budget. So by approving the budget tonight, the funding is available, but if the council has concerns about a particular item, those we could note those and we could not actually spend that funding yet. So I heard and saw some of the comments with some concerns about that request, and so we don't have to necessarily solve that tonight. And then last, the community funding, which is always a hot topic around the budget. We've received several requests. We have some other costs that we are sort of finding about, that we're getting ready to prepare and bring to the council. So it's not funded as a separate line item, but it's proposed to be included as part of the contingency budget. What we anticipate is bringing an item back to council that would have sort of all the things we expect to have to pay for from the contingency budget, along with the community funding requests, and then the council would decide which ones to prioritize this year and which ones not to. And so in the budget, it's not funded as a separate line item, but it's proposed to be included in the contingencies budget. Next slide, James. And so we went through this when we went through the presentation. We wanted to explain a little bit about after that first $11 million that goes to just paying for our police costs and our staff costs and keeping the lights on, literally paying utilities and things like that. You know, how does the city budget? What priorities are helping guide the budget development? And so we went through those, and I wanted to just kind of reiterate them because it answers, I think, a lot of the questions when somebody says, why did you fund this but not this? We started with these priorities, and the first priority was catching up on deferred maintenance. We started this last year and we prioritized it again this year. There were so many items that were deferred because that's the easy way to solve a budget crunch. Whenever there's a downturn in the economy, you say, we won't cut our trees this year. We won't maintain our parks to the level we used to maintain them. We'll cancel sidewalk maintenance. We'll cancel these things. And so those always, historically in Ojai, because there wasn't extra funding, those things were always deferred. There was always a reason not to get to them. We've tried to turn that around. And as a matter of fact, I'm at the California Joint Powers Insurance Authority Academy. And we were talking today about the fact that when you defer maintenance, it means that the repairs eventually cost more, because instead of maintaining things, you just have to replace things. And we've talked about that with the council. But they also, at this academy, brought up another point that even though we knew it, we just haven't thought about as much lately. But the point that when maintenance gets deferred, accidents happen and people get hurt and people damage their cars on potholes, or people have tree branches fall onto their property. And then that leads to claims, which costs more money than the maintenance would have cost. And at the end of that, the city ends up paying out claims and the problem still isn't fixed. So there's a lot of reasons why we should not defer the maintenance. I think it's sort of the easy thing to always just get into that habit, but we're trying really hard to reverse that habit. And one of the key ones is our paving. We have $3 million paving project launching now. We're actually planning right now that the actual paving will start immediately after the 4th of July, essentially July 5th. Not immediately after the parade, but on July 5th. And so we'd start paving then on a $3 million project. And this budget also includes starting the next round of paving in this fiscal year, which we expect to be about another $2 million. And I've said this before, but because we've deferred over the years, we're about $15 million behind in paving. And the city had a 10-year plan to pave, where at the end of the plan, we had worse quality streets than we did at the start of it. And that's the cycle that we are just finishing. And so what we're working on right now, and Public Works and I are planning to present this at the next council meeting, is a 5-year plan where at the end of the plan, we actually have higher quality streets. And in fact, we're working with the analysts right now on it, but it looks like if we fund it the level that it's proposed in this budget, that by the end of 5 years, we potentially would have the highest quality streets in the county. And I would guess we're amongst the lowest at this point. There's a paving score. We're in the 50s right now, close to falling under 50. With the 5-year plan we're going to propose to council, we'd be in the 80s on this pavement score out of 100. But again, it's just important to prioritize, because when we want to do something else and we want to cut something from the streets, you typically don't have anybody speaking for the streets compared to maybe other organizations and things. But it is something that if you don't do it, it impacts everybody in the community and leads to claims and things that then end up taking your budget and you end up spending more money in the long run. And so catching up on deferred maintenance was one of the top priorities that we focused on. Every maintenance related fund we tried to increase to have better maintenance of all our facilities. And I think people are seeing that in the real world too. Now we just replaced some of the slides at the park that I think in the past would have had to have lasted a few more years. And so next slide, please, James. The 3 other big priorities we focused on was continuing to pay down, but more aggressively paying down our unfunded pension and OPEB liability. So we just talked about that the city probably has about $15 million in deferred maintenance on streets, probably more than $15 million in deferred maintenance on streets. But we also have $10 million in unfunded pension and benefits liability. That impacts the city in a couple ways. We pay a large $500,000 towards unfunded pension liability this year and each year, and we pay another $400,000 towards the unfunded retiree medical liability in our budget. And so almost $1 million a year, and that's just to stay even. And so what we proposed in the budget for the second year in a row was prepaying those 2 categories, so that over time it's essentially like a mortgage. Is if you prepay it over time, you're paying less in the long run. You're paying less, quote unquote, interest. And so we focused on that in the budget. And so between streets and pension liability, that's about that's the city's outstanding liability, and it's about $25 million. So we've always said we're fortunate that we don't have loans and things like that here in Ojai, but we do have things that have been deferred that we need to start catching up on. And so those are 2 of the big priorities. Third was staffing. So the staffing costs we are proposing investing in staff. We talked about this previously, that one of the key things was realizing our public works crew members were getting paid less in the city than they are in the agencies that the other agencies in the city, like the water district, the sanitary district, etc. And so we proposed increasing their salaries to be competitive so that we can keep our maintenance team, which is, again, it's part of that everything working together of having more money to do maintenance and having the good people with experience to be able to then do that. So we have that, and then we had a couple of key positions, such as adding an associate planner position, so that we have institutional knowledge in the planning department, which has been the hardest department to keep institutional knowledge over the years. So staffing was another priority. And then 4th, building reserves, which we have made a priority in the last couple of years, and we did a really good job of it. And the council should be congratulated. We met the reserve goal for the first time ever. The city had a reserve goal for 20 years that it never meant and never really had a plan to meet. But we've now done it, and that was done by making hard decisions and tightening our belts. And so we've done the hard work, but I think with the potential recession looming and some of these cost pressures and things, we're proposing in this year's budget to keep trying to build reserves. And the way that shows up in the budget is the cannabis transfer tax, the $270,000, or I'm sorry, the cannabis tax revenue, the $270,000 that we're expecting. We show that going immediately to the reserve to try to keep building the reserve. And so that's also included in the budget for this year. Next slide, please, James. And so we've gone through the budget, the general fund budget, pretty heavy. The CIP we had scheduled, but we didn't really get to go through it, but I'm going to try to make it very simple. Essentially, we have a couple of slides here, and one is talking about the projects that we did this year. And those include things like the solar panel and microgrid installation at City Hall, the Kent Hall refurbishment and reopening for community meetings, the pergola and City Hall trellis repairs, the start of electrification of the city facilities, the paving program getting restarted, and as I mentioned, starting probably next week is what we're expecting. And then the ATP project continuing, and other key recreation facility repairs. And so this year, next slide, please, James. We were able to start doing more. Measure C is allowing us to have funding to do some of these things. So we started to show these things. And then some of them take some time to get started. The paving, for example, had to be bid out. And so that is starting next week. But we are being very aggressive, trying to catch up on all those items that we've been trying to get done. Next slide, please, James. And so for next year, we're being even more aggressive. We actually are planning for a $7 million capital improvement project program for next year. The big chunk of that, though, is the ATP, which is estimated at about $3.4 million in the budget. And then paving is $2 million. So those two are the biggest, highest priorities, about $5.4 million of the $7 million. But we are trying to also include money, funding for emission reduction projects, climate mitigation projects, wildfire mitigation, parks, facilities, parking lot repaves, and stormwater drainage projects. And so we are trying to make sure we're hitting all of the priorities that the council's established over the years, and with a fairly aggressive program of $7 million. I said this previously, but in the budget before Measure C, we would be fortunate if we had $1 million to do projects. And so with Measure C, and especially now since it's built up for a couple of years, we actually have money to do some really significant projects, and we can actually afford to do those things. And then the last slide will show the projects that we have planned for this year. As I mentioned, paving $2 million, ATP $3.2 million. Those are the two big ones. But there's some others. The Sarasota Park playground and equipment, we have $240,000 budgeted to start that project. $745,000 to what is categorized as emission reduction, but the biggest chunk is starting to convert to an electric trolley. It's more of our, maybe should have been categorized as our climate-related projects. And then we have $125,000 in repairs. We've continued to make repairs to Kent Hall in that space, and then the other buildings at the City Hall campus. $200,000 budgeted towards painting and fixing the roof at the arcade, which is a big project. And then we have a lot of little miscellaneous projects that total about another $500,000. So all in, $7.38 million capital improvement project budget. And we're able to afford that thanks to the Measure C and a couple of grants that we've gotten. And so essentially it's an aggressive CIP plan where we start to catch up on some of those items that have been deferred, like paving. And so with that, we recommend that the council hold the public hearing, complete the budget review, and adopt the budget and the salary schedule, which implements the items that we've just discussed.
Thank you, James. Much appreciated. Great progress. It's really good to see. Questions from council?
Yeah. Okay. Are there any, do you foresee any expenses when we finally work out having responsibility for Soul Park? Was that mentioned somewhere?
So there's a couple things. We have the funding for the agreement built into the budget.
Okay.
Noting that the agreement is still being reviewed by the Parks and Rec Commission, and we still aren't sure what the Parks and Rec Commission is going to recommend on that. But we had funding for the agreement built in. The second thing was we took the capital improvement projects to the Parks and Rec Commission, and we asked them, with the amount of funding that we have available, what's the priority to you? And so they did a really good job of working through their CIP for the next 5 years of what projects they think we should do each year. And they did put in funding to potentially build pickleball courts, but a couple years down the line, I think in years 3 and 4 of their CIP. They had in years 1 and 2, it was Serzodi Park and the Libby Park bathrooms, I think, were their 2 top priorities. And so there's funding in a couple different ways in the budget for potential pickleball projects.
Okay, I have another. As I think I just heard you say something about the pickleball courts 3 and 4 years down the road, but I've been told that the tennis group is very willing to do fundraising. Just does not, if a private group wants to take that on, they can speed up that process, correct?
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. And I think too, depending on what the proposal is, like these are to potentially build new pickleball courts in Soul Park. And so the Parks and Rec Committee put it in the plan so that if we get to that point and that's what's desired, we have money to do it. I don't know. Did I say the Parks and Rec Commission? I meant to say the Parks and Rec Commission put it in the plan. But there's, if other options arise, then those can be discussed at that time. But right now, that is what's proposed or what's included in their proposed capital improvement project budget.
My other question, if I may, would be related to what's the right word? Supportive services, supportive housing for the ever-growing community of homeless people behind City Hall. So if council decides that we need to do something more, like better restrooms, showers, whatever, or ideally a housing project, where would that money come from, in this budget, or would it have to come out of the reserves?
There's essentially 3 options, and one can be done within the budget proposed in front of you, which is it can be weighed against the other requests on the contingency fund budget. And if it's the priority, then the council agrees, and that's what that funding would, could potentially be used for. I know there's a lot of people lining up for that funding, so that, that's not going to be an easy conversation. But it could be there. The other thing with the budget is our plan for the next year, but there's always things never go according to plan. And so we quite frequently bring, an item where, like, let's say, for example, we had planned to do something else and like pave the parking lots, and then we decide, for whatever reason, it's not looking like it's going to happen. We could always potentially discuss a budget adjustment that the council would have to approve then, where we'd come back and say, okay, so we have this, $100,000 this year. So, and there could be a budget adjustment. And then third, like you said, is you could take it from reserves. Almost by default, I always have to recommend against that, because I still don't think we have enough money if there isn't a recession that we are not comfortable yet. We're better, but we're not comfortable yet. So that's sort of the easy answer in a way, but it's the easy answer until we're in trouble, and then it's not easy at all. So, but those are the sort of the 3 paths. But by approving the budget today, you aren't necessarily saying we aren't, like, there's no one thing you're saying we're not going to do this year. This is our plan for this year. And if something else comes up as a priority, we would look at how we could adjust the plan.
Okay,
And that would come back to council.
thank you.
And I'm going to follow up on a question with that, James. So the priority, just to confirm tonight, is to approve it because we are on deadline, correct?
Yeah, so there's a June 30th deadline for cities. The last couple of years, we had gotten ahead of it and adopted on June 13th, or like the meeting before. This year, timing was a challenge. We had a couple hearings get continued, so we're essentially at the deadline now. We either have to adopt it or we'd have to adopt what's called a continuing budget, which is just last year's budget as a holdover. And last year's budget was more restrictive than this year's budget. So if we don't adopt one, we essentially would not be able to do some of the things that we were trying to include in this budget.
Okay.
And then again, just to put everybody at ease, because I know we had planned to have more hearings and they got continued. So I know there's probably more discussion, due, but by this being adopted, we are not planning to rush out tomorrow and spend all the money. In fact, we can't. We wouldn't have the staffing to spend all the money on, immediately. So the budget can be adopted, and as over the next couple months can still be adjusted if there's key priorities the council wants to discuss.
Great, okay. And my other question is, in terms of the contingency fund is basically a rainy day fund. Can you give just a couple examples of what that fund has? Now it's 399,000 because we just gave away 1,000. What are some examples of projects that's been used for?
Yeah, I think last year, for example, we had earmarked $100,000 for our Soul Park partnership. And so when we had negotiated with that contract with the county, originally it was negotiated with a $100,000 payment, something, around that amount. And so the council pretty early on said, okay, that's going to be $100,000 of that $500,000 last year. So there was a big chunk, as I mentioned before, and we actually maybe helped with this year, but the city attorney, or not city attorneys, all attorneys' costs, including, potentially contracting out projects, those went over budget last year. And so when we approved them, we asked the council to approve paying for those from the contingency. And so that took up a chunk of it last year. This year, we tried to increase the attorney's budget, so we're not taking up as much of the contingency from that, but that's still a possibility if, and it's important for us to realize because as the council's deciding whether to take on litigation, but also as a reminder, anybody can sue us at any point for any reason or no reason whatsoever. And so you almost by default should expect to have some attorney's costs. And so we've tried to build some of those into the budget, but I think based on last year, that would probably be some of the funding too.
Good. We do live in California, after all.
Yeah.
Any other questions from council? Yeah. No? Okay. Nope.
We'll have some discussion after.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll go ahead and open the public hearing and move on to public comment. First, we have Wayne Maynard, then we have Bill Miley, and then Renee Roth.
Thank you much, Council. Wayne Maynard, and I'm here as a representative of the Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council. I'm a volunteer board member. The Fire Safe Council wishes to once again thank you for your past support through the community funding budget. It's discouraging that this year's budget does not provide any funding, but after hearing the city manager that there may be funds available through some other means if something comes up, which is kind of what my request was going to be. The community service grants that have been awarded to the Fire Safe Council in the past, last year, was instrumental in the Fire Safe Council being awarded a grant of over $1 million to update our Ojai Valley Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And the city is a partner of that project. If you're not able to fund the city community funding budget this year as you proposed, then I would hope you'll take into consideration any future requests where, again, we can leverage city funds into something that will improve the safety of our community through grants that we can obtain. Just as a reminder that Measure C did include fire mitigation as one of the descriptions for the projects that it funds, and that's what we do, is fire mitigation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Wayne. Next, we have Bill Miley, then Renee Roth, then Brian Akins.
I get very stiff with my fibromyalgia. Hello, Bill Miley. I quickly looked at the many of the 200 pages in the budget. I was looking for a section providing contract monies for needed city resident services. Based on past city council discussions, I assumed there was none, and there was none. To show I actually read some pages, on page 179, under contract services, the line item clean up tree maintenance and watering was reduced 50% this year, from 15,000 to 7,000. I assumed it was because we had a very wet winter. So I have 3 requests. One, I was recently at the Oxnard Costco and had trouble parking because the parking lot was full, and their sales tax is 9 1/4. Ours is 7 1/4. Each cent, I understand, increase will produce close to $2.5 million. 2, back to the roadway safety. If we lower our speed limit, it should help keep our streets in better shape, longer, and reduce paving costs. That would help. And 3, so with hope in my heart, I want to say, if there is an increase in revenues this year, maybe the council will consider some contract monies for housing loss prevention through Help of Ojai's continuum of care services, which they currently provide on a very small budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Next, we have Renee Roth, then Brian Akins, and then Larry Steingold.
Good evening, council members, and James, and our finance director, who's going to be holding the bag when James Vega leaves. We're hoping to hear updates from you, Pam Greer, and see where we might have opportunities to spend or save more money going into the future. So generally, James, I'm really glad you finally got this budget over the finish line. I think everybody knows that you need to approve it. Everybody knows you must approve it. And I'm really glad you brought up the $25 million in unfunded pension liabilities and deferred maintenance. I think that's a big deal. I think the city needs to, in the future, have the budget committee do something to address our unfunded long-term liabilities and follow through with safe, reliable sources of funding for our city in the future. I don't see that we have it yet. I'm concerned about the ATP project. For the current budget year, we had $2.1 million budgeted for Maricopa Highway, and phase 2 of the project, the Ojai Avenue project, was $1.465 million. And those costs have each jumped by $1 million. So that's what happens, and that's talking to exactly what you were saying, that when we defer and we defer and we defer, we have problems. So we can see that those costs have jumped by $2 million total. We've also, I understand, got issues with right-of-way access for the ATP, and I'm hoping you're going to leave some good, reliable follow-up information, James. I'm starting to think about what we're going to do in the vacuum when you're gone, because you've been juggling and managing and holding lots and lots of information in terms of, and also vacant positions. How many vacant positions do we have that need to be filled? Because I know you have managed to come through with aces everywhere on our revenue streams, and I'm very happy to see it. I think we're in good shape. I just think we need to address these long-term liabilities, and I think the Budget Committee is a great place to start getting serious. And I hope we have some ATP project follow-up with where we're at going forward in council meetings, so we know we're on time, on budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Next, we have Brian Akins, then Larry Steingold.
Getting old. First, real quick, still have my HPC hat on. Thank you, each of you, for the time you spent with us on the HPC today. As the mayor said, and I kind of slapped hands underneath, we all got it done. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, just to remind you that Kathy Smith and I are generations, longtime friends. We exchanged hugs on the going out the door and committed that we're going to work this and solve this together. Yes. Again, keep in mind that the sketch that my wife actually did the sketch on her mother for the memorial that's there in Little League. So thank you all. Now, museum hat on. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your support again of the museum. We work very hard to justify that, justify your trust in us. Just some updates. We do have some of our people who are retiring. Hard to believe, Jane Wyrick, who's been on the board since 1997. I think she was 18 at the time. Ann Scanlon, Jonathan Katz, Doug Lochner, Jim Richmond. The later three have suggested that we might look at an advisory council. I'm all for keeping good ideas available to us. New commissioners that we have coming on, Kevin Davis. When we were talking with Kevin Davis, and we asked him, Jim and I, what commission he wanted to be on. He said strategic planning and development. We said, you're in. Christopher Noxon, very popular, very nice person in our community, looking to become very involved. Has a young approach, he has an inventive approach, and so we're going to use that. Somebody you may know, we finally got her to come back. That's Julie Tumamite Stensley. At the beginning of the conversation, she was, At the end of the conversation, she was, sure, why not? And William Wyrick, you might know him. He is continuing the Wyrick family presence that has been around since 1997, and so he will be another one of our commissioners. Again, we are enriching our keeping talent we have, and then enriching us in these people that are coming in. And so, again, we thank you all for your support. And it's important to have the museum there because it retains that presence of our community in each of the different phases that we go through. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next, we have Larry Steingold.
Good evening, Larry Steingold. One side note, I met John Bosamel twice over the past 6 years. Nice guy. Anyway, I just...
Oh, John Brazenly.
Yes, Brazenly, sorry.
Yeah.
Regarding 25-mile speed limit on the roads, I know the budget. Why don't you just make the proposal so you can get it on the agenda? Only takes that much. Okay. Regarding everything, you can either raise taxes and pay the bills so we have plenty of money, or we don't raise the taxes, you roll the dice, and we see what happens. Okay, because the ATP, James, are you listening? Maybe not. Sorry to see you go. $3.5 million, how much money have we spent out of pocket above and beyond the bonds regarding offices and salaries and all this other nonsense? 5 million already? 6 million? 7 million? How much is deferred maintenance? We know costs are going up on everything. You've already heard Arts Commission, this commission, that, hey, we want a few dollars here, we got a few dollars there. Where's it all gonna come from? So we're betting on the interest rates. We're betting on the economy. So either we're gonna raise the taxes and get the money from everybody else, because we don't pay much here, and that's a great thing. And the forefathers and all your parents and everybody else has done a great job here. Okay, because I'm one of the biggest NIMBYs there is. Okay, this is great. Okay, and I want to keep it like this. But we either got to raise the money or cut your expenses, because this isn't going to work. All right, you've got all this going on. I mean, you've seen it. We've only got so much money. And you want to have this proposal and that, where are you going to get it from? The roads? Okay, use the roads as traffic calming devices. I don't care, but let's say what it is. Either we're going to live within our means or we're not. Raise the taxes or not. But this is a shot. 15 million, 16 million every year, great. 5% increases. You want to hire more people. You just hired another guy with a grant, or person, sorry, for $56,000 for the police, civilian, to communicate with the police. For what? What, are you going to be a receptionist? What are they going to do? That money could have gone into safety. It could have gone into traffic bumps. It could whatever. But we're living on grants here, and that's fine. I don't want to reach into my pocket. Nobody does. Everybody's done a great job here. Your family, everybody's family. It's wonderful. So let's keep it that way. But we're either going to raise taxes, and I know the mothership right now has got a problem. Okay, the inn, and everybody else, but that's the way it's got to go. Or we suffer. So it's either going to be the tourists or us. And quite honestly, I'd rather have it be the tourists. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Weston, any comments online?
No raised hands on Zoom, Mayor.
Okay, we will go ahead and close the public hearing, and we'll move on to discussion. Rachel?
So first of all, just want to again say, you all are amazing. The Budget Committee, amazing. Thank you so, so much. And James, thank you for spearheading this effort. It's incredible. So I know that we need to approve the budget, and I know that we need to move forward with it, but I want to address just a couple of things, and I know that we can't talk about them yet because they're not on this agenda, but I would like to, I think there are some opportunities with raising sales tax, or I think there are some other revenue generating options that we can discuss, and so that's something I would like to have in the back of my mind, or the back of our minds as we're talking about this. And then the other thing is with regard to the contingency and the community funding for, I like the way, James, you suggested that we have agencies, local agencies or not-for-profit organizations, that their approach to getting funding is different, and that would be that if they're offering a service to the city, like Help of Ojai, or like an organization that would come in and want to provide shelter or services for the unhoused, that they could apply, like submit an RFP and apply with a contract. And even the chamber or the peace, the peace organization. But one thing that I think could get a little messy with that, because we do have such a limited contingency budget, I think it could get messy with these organizations and people wondering, how do I do that? And so one thing I would like for us to talk about in the future is having a process that it wouldn't be a granting process, because the funding would be coming out of a different budget, a line item, but a process that we open RFPs and we close RFPs and we discuss them all at one time, to kind of have a better handle on how we're using that contingency funding. So that's it.
Other comments?
Yeah, I've got a few, but I'll wait if somebody's ready to go.
Go ahead, Andy.
So we have been talking about places where we can get tax increases, and I think we need to have those come forward. I know we've had a really jammed agenda for the past few months, but Sales tax increase, I'm very interested in finding out when was the last time we raised the sales tax? Where are we in comparison to other communities in our county? We have talked about a transfer fee tax for sales of homes above a certain amount, some form of tax on that. And we've talked about a vacancy tax for homes that are not being occupied as a primary residence. Those are all places where we could raise some money. They all require going to the voters. And so we need to start thinking about the idea that I think our next opportunity to do that is going to be March of 2024. And we'll have to think about whether a general election is a better time to do that. But I think we need to get looking at that. And I am going to agree with something that Mr. Steingold says more than once, which is that we have to look to the county more on things where it is a valley-wide issue. We represent a quarter to a third, somewhere in there, of the population of the valley. And so when we look at something like services for the homeless, we should be looking at a partnership with the county that involves our quarter to a third share in comparison to their share. And I think there's a lot of issues where we need to be looking to the county more, at least, as Mr. Steingold says, at least making the request. Because we do, as a city, do a lot for the entire valley, and we should look at the county participating in that. But I want to, like everybody else, really thank James for the hard work that he's done on putting our budget together. I have talked to Johnny Johnston and James to a certain degree about the future liability issue. And, you know, so the numbers are large because it's projected over time. But my understanding, and I'd like, you know, anyone to weigh in on this, my understanding, I've been assured that we are paying those potential liabilities down at a very fiscally responsible rate, and that we have actually increased the rate at which we are paying those liabilities down in the recent past. And so I feel very confident that we're doing the fiscally responsible thing. In fact, I just shared with Pam earlier tonight that one of the first things I did when I got elected was talk to Johnny Johnson about the budget, and he assured me that we were in very good hands with James and Pam, and that you know, that we were being very responsible in how we're managing those issues, particularly the contingent liabilities or the future liabilities.
May I make a
Well,
comment?
Councilmember Rule was next.
May I make a comment about something? Thank you. I agree that we need to involve the county with services for the homeless, and we did meet, our task force did meet with Supervisor Matt Levere, and he emphasized that in order, because he said there's so much funding. He has assured us there is funding for whatever project we propose, but in order to get that money, we have to involve city staff. It can't just go through our group. We have to, so at the end of the meeting, I have a proposal to get, so that we can get some of that funding. But I completely agree, and that's, and while I'm mentioning it, Supervisor Matt Levere is gonna be in front of Libby Fountain this Friday from 9 to 11 o'clock I was going to mention it at the end of the meeting, but, make sure the public knows that they can meet with him. Am I breaking a rule? He's glaring at me.
No, that's fine, sorry. That wasn't a glare.
That's all I wanted to say.
Any approval of the project is going to have to come back on a future agenda.
Yes, I'll mention the details, more details at the end, but I just wanted to respond to what Councilmember Whitman said, getting county funding.
Councilmember Rule?
So I want to sort of agree with the idea, and we've talked about this, I think, every meeting for the last 4 meetings about sales tax, the TOT tax, vacancy tax, all of these taxes. So I think that we need to move that to a priority item. I think we've also talked about moving it to a priority item. And I don't know exactly how that happens. I know at the end of this meeting, we can say we have a date certain if we have 3 votes. But I think it's absolutely essential that we move forward with getting these taxes, getting clear on what taxes we would like to propose and moving forward on it, because it will require a fair amount of public outreach and comments and things like that, so people have a really clear idea. There's been, a lot of chatter about the ATP and the amount of money that it's going to cost and where are you going to get the funds. And at this point, we're on a go with the ATP, so we need to figure out, it's in this budget, and kudos to you, James, absolutely. But we need to figure that out. And I think taxes are, and we keep talking about this. So let's really move forward with that, make it a priority. And also with Matt Levere, there is a ton of county money that they get to disperse to all of the municipalities, but we need to knock on their door and say, our money, we are a proportion of the county. We would like that money. So I think we also need a mechanism within City Hall to check in all of the time and make sure that we're getting the funds that are due to us, because they're not going to come to us and say, here's your part. We have to knock on their door and say, where is our part? And I think we're moving towards that as we have a real need with housing. So that would be another thing. Other than that, I would make a motion that we approve this budget. And, once again, James, thank you so much. I don't really know how you do it. And, can I just beg you to stay? No, never mind. But that having been said, I make a motion that we approve this budget.
I'll second the motion.
Great. And I just wanted to add gratitude to Pam and James. Much appreciated. And having worked with James through COVID, you are a true miracle worker. And it's touch and go. But look at us now. Yeah. It's pretty fast. Yep. It's pretty incredible. And so I'm just so grateful about the reserves, because that was very clear that we really needed it. And to be in this position now is really wonderful. One other tax someone mentioned to me, other cities are doing this, taxing Amazon. Just going to put that out there. Okay.
Sure. List.
And then I agree with my council members. Let's get the county involved, because there is a lot of money out there. We just need to ask for it. And Heidi Whitman, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am a little bit, because you did graciously offer to do a workshop for our local nonprofits to find grants, and council approved it. So, you want to do it? Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. So we'll schedule that if you're still up for it. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Okay. So
I wanted to thank you for serving on the Finance Committee and working through this and being so deeply involved. I know that you have been very conscientious, and I have turned to you often, not often, but on occasion, and said, how are we, financially? And you've always told me how we are financially. So thank you for sticking in with that as well.
I appreciate it,
yeah.
Councilmember Rule. It definitely brings out the Midwestern in me, like save it, save. Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second. Roll call, please,
Yes,
Weston.
Mayor. Mayor Sticks.
Yes.
Councilmember Lang.
Yes.
Councilmember Rule.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Francina.
Yes.
Councilmember Whitman.
Yes?
Motion passes.
Woo, okay, exciting. Thank you. Thank you, Pam. Thank you, James. All right, we will move on to item number 3, the city manager recruitment process. Is there a staff report, James?
Yes, a very quick one. And a lot's changed since we wrote this. And I think I've communicated that individually to council members, but this is the one chance we have to actually talk about it as a group. When we wrote the item, we were sort of trying to figure out what some options and processes could be. I think we've sort of nailed it down, and we're recommending a process, especially with the tight timeline. As the staff report notes, my last day is scheduled to be July 14th, which basically leaves us one council meeting to try to get somebody appointed. And so what I am recommending, and this fits into our promise to be more transparent about when only having closed sessions when we truly need them, and then also being very clear about what those closed sessions are about. I'm recommending that we hold a closed session this Thursday to interview interim candidates, but also potentially we're working on the agenda to talk about how we will fill the permanent position. And we will be transparent about that. We will report out on what's decided. Any decision that's made about appointing either an interim or a permanent candidate will have to come to an open session agenda. So we'll make sure that it's done, very transparently. But just for anybody wondering who says, well, why couldn't this be in public? The reality is if you're making somebody interview for their job in a public meeting, the odds are anybody with a brain won't accept the interview. And I can say that, from recent experience myself, that if that was a requirement, I probably would not, or I definitely would not have proceeded recently. So to get a good candidate, we are going to have a closed session interview process. The council can always decide to come out and do more publicly after that, but we need to do that. And I know it's not right now, it's not popular to say that we need to have a closed session, but this is one time I would say that we really do need to. And so I am recommending that we hold a closed session this Thursday. I think we were trying to work to get it set for about 1 p.m. Because we were trying to do it in the afternoon, and it was a scheduling conflict for too many people. At 1 p.m., all council members can attend. We have some staff scheduling conflicts that I'll let everybody know about, but the council members can attend, which is really the key important thing for this discussion. And so with that, I recommend that. And then from that discussion, I expect we will have a lot more to talk about at a future meeting as far as, whether we hire a recruiter. And that's one of the key questions that I will say I am probably going to end up recommending, because we've had, we're still hiring an assistant city manager and we're making progress, but they're not going to be starting in time to probably do that recruitment as fast as we need to. So we're recommending essentially the council can give any feedback, any direction, can decide to either hold the closed session or not, or how they want to do it. But that's what we're recommending, is a closed session on Thursday to interview the interim candidates.
Thank you, James. Any questions from council?
Yes. Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to know, are they coming in person or is this on Zoom?
We're expecting.
It's all Zoom, partially because of it's a pretty big time rush. So rather than try to coordinate a few weeks out, we're going to do a Zoom interview. We basically have to know by about Tuesday if the council is going to select one of those people, to then put it on the agenda to get approved in public the following Tuesday. So we decided right now that time was more important than getting them in person.
So we're all going to be here, but they're going to be on the screen.
Yeah, and it'll likely be in the conference room, given OBGMA is meeting that afternoon here, and Chambers,
Correct.
so we'll probably be in the conference room. The other component is the Zoom interviews saves costs in terms
Yes,
of the
of
city's not
course,
paying for
yeah.
folks to fly in for interviewing.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I just wanted to be clear on it. Thank you.
And I won't be here, so I'll be on Zoom. I'll be joining through Zoom.
Okay.
Great. Andy?
So is that an option, joining on Zoom, or is that,
Yes,
It
with
is.
certain legal requirements to be followed. Most importantly, disclosing the remote location publicly unless the just cause emergency circumstances exceptions apply. So Councilmember Lang will be listing the remote location. So we could, for example, list your office if you're willing.
I'll have to figure that out, but also I'm gonna need permission slips for APCD and for OBGMA, because I will, if I attend that session, I'm gonna miss both of those, but I think I need to attend that session.
Yeah, we should all.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to public comment. Nothing in the House, anything online, Weston?
No raised hands, Mayor.
Okay, let's move on to discussion. Anybody
I'll
ready
make-
for?
I'll
thank
make
you.
a motion. If people, I mean, we can
Yeah, we're
still
going to discuss it.
discuss it. So I'll make a motion. Sorry, I can't see with my glasses. I'll make a motion that we follow this process for recruitment on the interim city manager position.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
We should add in whatever James mentioned, that there was gonna be some discussion of the permanent position as well, and we should add that, I think, to the motion.
Friendly
All right.
amendment for sure.
Okay, are we ready for a roll call?
Do you need anything else?
No,
from
the
us?
item will be agendized as public employment and public employee appointment, interim city manager, and final city manager. Mindful that other state laws require the final approval of those positions to be in public, but it's an opportunity for interviews for interim candidates, and for the permanent, it's an opportunity for the council to discuss the process of making the appointment, which could include hiring, directing a recruiter, or that process to go forward, and if desired, sorting out some options for future public participation in the process. Some cities will have a public component, not the first interview. As noted, you don't get good candidates if the first interview is public. After the council's made some finalist selections, there's ways to do that. So that'll all be considered in the closed session to come, if approved.
Great, thank you.
Do we know how many candidates we have?
A handful. For interim is a handful,
Like 6?
smaller.
Handful smaller.
Smaller hand.
One hand, and smaller than one full hand.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm being vague because we don't have the full list
Yeah.
precisely confirmed yet.
Okay,
Right.
all right.
But it's
fair
not,
enough.
it's not a lot. This is a very compressed process.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Roll call, please,
Roll call.
Weston.
Councilmember Whitman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Francina.
Yes.
Councilmember Lang.
Yes.
Mayor Sticks.
Yes.
Councilmember Rule.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, great. We will be there on Thursday, and it's, James, your last day is on Bastille Day, which I think is very fitting, so.
Oh, wow.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back with item number 4. Thank you.
Were you going to go?
Okay. Okay, we are back, and we will begin with item number 4, request for, can we come to quiet, please? Thank you. Request for indemnification of Councilmember Rule. Councilmember Rule, do you have a presentation?
No, I don't have a presentation. I guess I can speak to it. I think it's probably, I mean, it's going to come down to what the government code says. So I would ask for Matt's opinion. I mean, all I really need to, that I feel like I need to emphasize is that at the time, you know, I was acting as a city council member. And as such, I am entitled to indemnification. I don't think anyone can, and there are 2 exceptions for indemnification. One is fraud, and I have unfortunately forgotten the other one. Pardon me? Oh, bribery, fraud or bribery, which I think none of those are in play here. And finally, you know, we have a DA sort of recommendation that while I violated the Brown Act, I did it with honest intentions and belief that I was. Would you like to ask the audience? I don't think your mic's on.
Sorry, could we please stay quiet in the audience? Thank you.
That it was done with honest intentions, and to Matt's point, or the entire council's point, I don't believe that. I think I am adhering to the DA's definition of violation of the Brown Act, and I like the council here, I'm not sure that I actually violated the Brown Act. But that having been said, I understand that the DA is the final word on that. So I have basically said I violated the Brown Act. You know, there are conditions around times when you can speak in closed, you can speak what happened in closed session. And there are conditions around that allow you to do that. I did not. The district attorney has a process that is not codified in either law or in case law, but they have a process that they follow, and so I am adhering to it. So my understanding is that as a city council member, I am indemnified against actions that I take that are not bribery or fraud. So I'm asking for indemnification. You know, the other side of this is that, you know, if you don't, it will be an option for me to sue to get reimbursement for council expenses, and additionally to get costs for having to sue to get reimbursement. I mean, I will speak. I don't think there's any reason to speak to the lawsuit. So I'm not going to. I'm just going to let that be what it is. But this is exactly the reason why indemnification occurs, is because anybody can sue any council member for any reason, for anything. So likewise, each and every one of you have broken the Brown Act, have violated the Brown Act according to the DA. You may or may not argue that. So a citizen could come to you just as easily and hand you just as easily the same complaint. I could just switch out your names, actually, if you really wanted to know about it. So you are at the same risk as everyone else, because anyone can sue a city council member. Hence, that is why indemnification happens. I'm not going to go deeply into this. It's either the council's either going to agree or not. I think that the law supports me 100%. So that's really all I have to say to it. I would appreciate either the city attorney's opinion or the city manager's opinion. And I will also point out that when these same people sued Cynthia Burrell as our
City clerk.
as our city clerk, and also the city, I don't know, Matt was the recipient of that, but I don't think he was the named partner, the named suit, but we now have an attorney from his firm defending one part of that suit, and we have another attorney defending a second part of that suit. But we did not take a vote on indemnification for them, and I think...
That's not correct, but continue.
well,
I just didn't remember it.
I would like to hear what is correct.
Yeah. I mean, you can say that we didn't, but the agendized item said no report out expected, which means that no vote was expected. I don't want to argue with you about this. I really don't, because it was our first council meeting when this came up. I think it was our first council meeting. Point being, I don't know what to say if you're going to contend that we took a vote. I would ask the other council members, do they remember taking a vote about whether or not we would indemnify other members of the city? I don't know. So anyway,
I believe it
that's
was
it.
our third meeting, January 24th.
it might have been. It
was the third.
Yeah,
one
we
in
were in the small
December.
conference room. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's
Mr.
yeah.
City
So-
Attorney?
So
I
there.
want to hear from the city attorney.
Yeah, I do too.
And I want to hear the difference between council member Rule's situation and Cynthia Burrell. And then I'll make comments at the appropriate time.
Sure, happy to answer a couple of points. So the council, by consensus in closed session, approved the defense of the city and the defense of the city clerk in that lawsuit, the Hess versus Burrell et al. Lawsuit. It wasn't contested. There was no need for vote. It was consensus. Obviously, this is contested. The council's question that it has to answer is whether to act tonight, whether to approve the request for indemnification, whether to disapprove the request for indemnification, or whether to take no action tonight and continue the matter for further evaluation, which could include evaluation, a request to me to prepare a lengthy memo, which I haven't prepared pending request from council. It could also include request for other council to prepare it, given that I was a witness to some of the facts at issue. The other components to note are, in considering the indemnification request, the council has to consider Government Code Section 825, which provides for indemnity for a act or omission occurring within the scope of his or her employment as an employee of the public entity. That's question number one for the council. Number two is whether an exception in Government Code Section 825.6 sub A is triggered actual fraud, corruption, or actual malice, or willfully failed or refused to conduct a defense of the claim or action in good faith. Those are all questions for the council to consider. The other component is, as I understand it, the council could ask for more detail from Councilmember Rule on the request than has been provided so far. It's also up to the council. The other thing I would note is that my advice is that Councilmember Rule not vote on the item, as it is a request by her for the payment of money on her behalf by the city. So my advice is that the other four members of council vote and Councilmember Rule recuse, as you and I discussed before. That's not a surprise.
Right. So, no, that's absolutely not a surprise. So I would just for clarification, what is the fourth condition for under Government Code 825? I didn't get the fourth one.
Oh, the fourth one I said was 825.6.
Is that in here?
No, none of this
Okay.
is in there.
No, it's in, it's exceptions to the duty for indemnity, and the council, public entity, can refuse to indemnify because of actual fraud, 1, 2, corruption, 3, actual malice, or 4, if an employee willfully failed or refused to conduct a defense of the claim or action in good faith, which may not yet be applicable because the lawsuit, to my knowledge, hasn't moved forward.
Okay.
All right. I think you were served tonight, but I don't think there's been any response yet.
No, there hasn't.
I have a question. Can you estimate, Matt, approximately how much this has cost the city in terms of money and time, staff time? That it was revealed, closed session was revealed in the meeting, and then we've had to talk about it several times, versus taking, you and James suggested that Councilmember Rule take a different path. So because that choice your advice was not followed, how much has this cost the city?
I think all told, if you add up the discussions regarding indemnity and the Brown Act and Transparency Workshop and the discussions regarding the District Attorney's Challenge and all of the responses thereto, easily several tens of thousands of dollars. I haven't done that analysis directly, but it's substantial costs, especially when you consider the effective hourly rate for council meetings, of which there have been a fair amount on the matter.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, are we ready to move to
I
more
have a
questions?
question.
Well,
Susan?
but that comment could be applied to other lawsuits as well. It's unfortunate. I consider this a frivolous lawsuit.
Wait, is this, we're still on questions for
Okay.
staff?
All right,
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm assuming that that we're going to find out from the public what this is really all about, because I don't understand what this is.
Any other questions from council?
I don't have any questions.
Councilmember
Go ahead.
Ryan?
Actually, for Councilmember Rule.
Yeah.
So it's my understanding that with this lawsuit, settlement is an option.
We offered a settlement the third day, and they refused it, and our settlement was that we would adhere to the DA's findings, and that, that was our settlement. We offered a settlement the next day, and, it was denied. Not interested in settling, apparently.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the request for indemnification, it would be paying for this to go to trial or to go in front of a judge?
Correct. Now, I will say, yeah, that is correct, that it is lawyers' costs. So basically, I'm being sued as a council member for, violating the Brown Act. If I weren't a council member, you couldn't sue me for violating the Brown Act. Obviously, I did it from the dais. You can decline to agree, but I did it from the dais. I did it as a council member. So I don't think that is a question. I think if you went to court, I don't think the judge would say, no, you weren't acting. In other words, I think if this goes to court, my guess is that this is all going to be thrown out because, the DA has made his determination. He has said it was, an honest mistake. It was my first, so he has said all of this. The foremost legal authority in the county on the Brown Act has said all of this. So, I'm not going to, the thing to realize is that every one of you are susceptible to this exact same thing. You have all, according to the DA, violated the Brown Act. And so each one of you could be the recipient of exactly the same thing. And that's what's really important to remember. And that's why indemnification of city employees is so important, because when things are done, and I sat here and I said, I do not believe I am violating the Brown Act. And I did not believe I was violating the Brown Act. Laws are interpreted, that's why you have attorneys, because laws are interpreted. And we are going to go to court, and one attorney is going to say one thing, they're going to interpret the law this way, and another attorney is going to go and interpret the law that way. So my interpretation of the law, and I did think it through, and I did get other opinions. My interpretation of the law was that I was not violating the Brown Act. And that was my interpretation of the law, honestly and truly. That was my interpretation of the law. And, you know, Matt and I called James and Matt as soon as I possibly could. I would say that we have differing ideas on how that conversation went, but there are two exceptions that allow a council member to disclose what happened in closed session outside of the one of disclosing. There are three. One is disclosing to the DA, but there are two others that allow a council member to disclose what happened in closed session. I was not made aware of these at the time, that there are those two options. So, I mean, I don't want to relitigate this. If it ends up going to court, it ends up going to court, and I am absolutely fine with that. I cannot guarantee that I will not come back and ask for reimbursement for court costs on this, and also reimbursement for having to probably, you know, legally go get the reimbursement. So in the end, I think the salient facts are that each and every one of you, according to the DA and myself, have violated the Brown Act. Each and every one of you are also susceptible. That is why you have indemnification. You did not know, and you may contend that you didn't violate the Brown Act. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is what the highest member of the law who determines these in the county has determined. So that's where we stand, and I'm tired of pushing this off. You know, we need to move past this, and we need to move on, and you know, every attorney who's looked at this says it's an absolutely frivolous lawsuit. So, you know, it is what it is, and I'm not worried about it. So thank you.
What are those two other options, Councilmember Rule, that you mentioned?
The other two options are, so one is if I had come out and I hadn't been so specific and named specificity. So I named names. I said so-and-so from this particular firm, and so-and-so recommended it. And so it, you know, so it's specificity. If I had come out and spoken more generally and just said, we went behind closed session and we decided to do this, this, and this, and not say the specificity of it.
I'm sorry, real quickly, it was my understanding that it was more about, rather than it was that you're entitled to say, it's my opinion that what happened.
That's the second one. That's the second example, is it's my opinion. I could have said, in my opinion, we did certain things in closed session. So coming off as an opinion, but what I did was I was too factual on both those cases. I was too factual. I didn't preview that this is my opinion, and I wasn't told that that was a possibility of the Brown Act at the time. Before I disclosed any of this in my conversation with the city attorney, I wasn't given the option that I could possibly do this. What was said to me was, the only option you have is to go to the DA. And in fact, there were other options that could have been used, but I did not know that. And I did not know that until the DA actually told me that.
Could we get some clarification on that from
city attorney? And I'm happy to show you a document by the DA stating that, you know, had you done this, but you didn't. I'm happy to show you that.
And that document was in the council's pack at the previous meeting.
Okay, thank you.
It's inherent in the district attorney's letter, which states in part, the prohibition on closed session disclosure has three exceptions: disclosure to a district attorney or grand jury concerning a perceived violation of law; 2, expressing an opinion concerning the propriety or legality of actions taken by a legislative body of a local agency in closed session, including disclosure of the nature and extent of the illegal or potentially illegal action; or 3, disclosing information acquired by being present in a closed session under this chapter that is not confidential information. Quoting from the DA's letter, although exceptions 2 and 3 might have been potentially applicable, Ms. Rule's factually detailed disclosure exceeded the limited scope offered by either exception. The factual details contained within Ms. Rule's disclosure exceeded an opinion concerning the propriety or legality of council actions and exceeded the nature and extent of such actions. nor does Ms. Rule's belief that council discussions exceeded the scope of the listed agenda exceptions transmute such discussions into non-confidential information. Moreover, Councilmember Rule is not entitled to unilaterally decide her disclosure of closed session information qualified under exception 2 or 3 above. Otherwise, a member of any legislative body could publicly disclose privileged closed session information upon a claimed good faith belief that the disclosure falls under exceptions 2 or 3 above.
Right. So just to sort of clarify that, yes, those are the two exceptions that I could have conceivably used, but was unaware of. And what I was also unaware of, there is no case law, neither is there a statutory law that says the DA is the deciding factor in that. That is the DA has decided that that's the process that the county uses for that. And so I have entered into conversations with him to get much more clarity, but there was nowhere that said the DA is the deciding, that I can't unilaterally decide that. In retrospect, it makes absolute sense that I unilaterally can't decide these things. But like I said, there's nothing in either statutory law or case law that says that the DA is the one who has to give me the permission to do that. So it's complicated, but having said that, I understand why the DA would be the one who would make that determination. And so when I say that I could make an argument that the DA is wrong, but I'm not going to, because it doesn't make sense to me to do that, and I think we also need to move forward. That having been said, if the council, you're all...
Hear from the public.
Yes, sorry. Boo-boo.
Okay,
I just also had one or two more comments. You interrupted me.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
As you typically do. So
well-
my conversation, and my memory of the conversation you're referring to in January is different than yours, but that doesn't need to be litigated again. We explained the options. You took a different option. The district attorney, who is not the final arbiter of the Brown Act's requirements, has declared in the quotes I read from his letter that those actions violate the Brown Act. It'll be up to the council to decide whether or not the actions you took were within the course and scope of your employment as a city council member. I would also note that the final arbiter of any Brown Act issue is a jury and or a judge, depending on the nature of a lawsuit. The district attorney is a critical part of the Brown Act enforcement infrastructure, very critical part, and as we acknowledged in the city's actions at the previous meeting in improving the unconditional commitment to cease and desist, which forecloses lawsuits as threatened by the district attorney in the May 15th letter, that's been foreclosed because the district attorney has accepted the council's response is substantially compliant with the statute, which forecloses that lawsuit. Other lawsuits exist, as is this one here, but those in the end are judged by a court through the court process. Thank you.
Agreed.
Councilmember Lang?
To the city attorney, the conversation in January, is that the conversation that in which Councilmember Rule asked you, or was there a conversation about how to proceed with going forward with expressing concern about violations that she had made?
Yeah, as Councilmember Rule stated previously, she'd asked, how do I get this information out in the public? We provided the process, which did not include unilateral disclosure, but included other options. We all have different memories of something that happened 5 months ago, and the events that happened since then have long outweighed that particular event.
And did you discuss, and James, this is for you too, the repercussions, the jeopardy that revealing closed session puts the city in?
As I recall, yes, there was discussion of the risks in the situation and the options, and
okay, all right.
Yeah,
Are
here
we
we
ready
are.
to move to close to
Public
comments? Yep. First, we'll go with Bill Miley and then Anita Cram. Oh, thank you. Okay, think great. Bill Miley, Anita Cram, Sabrina Venskis, Renee Roth, Larry Steingold.
Good evening, Bill Miley. The issue is new to me, so I did some background reading. I understand the state law assigns the Brown Act enforcement to the State Fair Political Practices Commission. I did not read anywhere where the suit document, that this complaint has been submitted to the FPPC. The claim by the suing attorney that the city attorney's advice on disclosure was correct has been questioned. An important element in public government is doing the right thing, practicing ethical behavior as an elected servant. That requires, if fully believed, to disclose illegal or unethical conduct when found. Considering the issues that were going on, Councilmember Rule, as a brand new elected official, believed she was acting with high ethics in her disclosures. Subsequently, the council member has gained additional information about how to process such questionable items according to California law. Oh, I read the lawsuit document too, and there's a typo there. It's on page 5, lines 17 to 18. It shows the date 12/2023. We haven't gotten there yet. So, but the probably one good solution is to agree on following the Brown Act and dropping the lawsuit. She's already agreed to that. And we now know more about the Brown Act than we ever wanted to know. And my last comment is from my heart. It takes the high road of forgiveness. I forgive you for what happened. You've recognized it. You've held it within your soul and your heart, and we're going to work together, because the only way to get anywhere is to cooperate and to problem solve. And I think if we were all able to forgive and drop it, we'd be better off as a city. And we could pave our roads better or something like that.
Thank you, Bill. Next, we have Anita Cram, then Sabrina Venskis, then Renee Roth.
Good evening, everyone. So I urge City Council to vote no on the indemnification of member rule in this lawsuit. A yes vote would mean that you approve taxpayers' money to pay her legal fees for her free will choice to what appears to be break the law. The Ventura County District Attorney's Office found that Councilmember Rule violated the Brown Act with her disclosure on a closed session council information. She was not entitled to, as it's been said, unilaterally decide that she had the authority to do so. There were other avenues. She's responsible to know that. The report detailing this can be found in the June 16th City Council meeting agenda under discussion item number 3 if you choose to look at it. The individuals who filed this lawsuit are long-standing active community members. 2 have lived in our city for 31 years each. Another has lived in our city for 43 years, and another one for 16 years. Of the others, one has been in the valley for 72 years and lived in the city 20 of those years. And the other one has been in the city 43 years, or in the valley 43 years, both in the city and the valley. They know this is improper behavior by a city council member. There has been a loss, as the lawsuit says, there has been a loss of confidence in the integrity of the local legislative process as a result of this behavior. These courageous individuals have come forth to say, this is not right. You are breaking our city government system with this type of behavior. There needs to be consequences for this illegal and disruptive behavior. Any city council member choosing to illegally disclose closed session, private, and confidential information should be held accountable for their actions, not the taxpayers. If City Council votes to indemnify member rule, some of the consequences could be force taxpayers to foot the bill for illegal actions by a member, undermine the credibility of City Council by their support of inappropriate illegal activity, reward illegal actions, thus inviting it to occur again. This is an empty bucket, or a bottomless bucket, I guess I want to say. In addition, council member Rule needs to recuse herself from discussions that are a part of decision-making on this item, and as the lawyer has advised, abstain from voting. There is a clear conflict of interest here. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Next week,
May I ask a question? This is really, I think, the crux of the matter. It seems like the previous speaker is blaming Councilmember Rule.
we're really not supposed to comment on public question. I really feel like we need to allow the
Okay,
community
I'll
to
wait.
discuss.
Yeah,
Okay.
Wait.
Question me, that's fine, but don't.
Well, okay, I will question you. May I question her? Okay.
I'm fine with that, if it's allowed.
Ms. City Attorney?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I would, number one, recommend anybody who's speaking, speak to a microphone.
Yep.
This might all be litigated. Let's get it on tape.
Okay.
Number two, the council can ask questions of the speaker. The speaker can answer them or refuse to answer at the speaker's will.
Okay.
I'll turn it back to the mayor to control
Yeah.
who's got the mic.
I have a question of the speaker.
Okay, Anita, you got the
Yeah.
mic? Thanks.
As the lawyer, maybe I shouldn't answer something, but go ahead.
Anita, are you clear in your mind that without this lawsuit, this would not cost the taxpayers any money? It's the fact that these members of the public decided to sue Council Member Rule that there's potential taxpayer expense. But without that, and the city attorney can correct me, if they had not brought forth this lawsuit, this would not even be on the agenda, correct?
It's a chicken and egg question. If you go back to the beginning of time, if Councilmember Rule hadn't made the disclosures, if the closed sessions hadn't been discussed the way they were, then Councilmember Rule hadn't disclosed them, then the lawsuit hadn't been filed. Any one of those steps would have prevented where we are now. So if the plaintiffs dropped the lawsuit, then it would prevent the indemnity request. If the plaintiffs hadn't filed the lawsuit, it would have prevented the indemnity request.
Yes.
If
I think
Councilmember
that's
Rule
the
hadn't made the
critical
disclosures,
point.
that also would have prevented the
Yes,
indemnity
but
request.
that's the critical point. The point is that if, whatever was the last two things you said, that if there...
Any one of the steps that occurred to get us to here, had that not occurred, that would have prevented us from getting here. But it's about each of them had to happen to get here. Any one of them could have not happened. The most recent step that happened is the request by Councilmember Rule to be indemnified, and the step before that is the filing of the lawsuit.
I'm going to recommend that we continue with
Those
public
are-
comment at this point.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a.
Yeah, I don't think you really answered
Okay,
it.
next we have Sabrina Venskis, then Renee Roth, and then Larry Steingold.
Hi, Sabrina Venskis, attorney for the 7 plaintiffs in Byrne et al. Versus Rule. Just to clarify a couple misconceptions that were stated by Ms. Rule. This is not a lawsuit against a council member. This is a lawsuit against an individual named Leslie Rule, as well as another individual named John Drucker. The lawsuit is brought under section 54963 that provides that a person may not disclose confidential information that has been acquired by being present in a closed session authorized by other government code sections to a person not entitled to receive it unless the legislative body authorizes disclosure of that confidential information. That's important for you to know for 2 reasons. That section allows a private right of action against any person that discloses closed session information. That could be somebody that's not a council member, but if the person discloses the confidential information without the legislative body, meaning the council, allowing it, they are acting outside of their scope as a council member, and they can be sued under this section. The other reason why that's important that I want to tell you is because you were told, I heard tonight from Ms. Rule, you were told that you could also get a lawsuit for allegedly, from her perspective, violating the Brown Act on the agendized item question, right? The question about whether items were agendized correctly. That's incorrect. You as an individual could not be sued for that. And the reason why is because the provision that Ms. Rule as an individual is being sued under applies only to disclosure of confidential information. It doesn't have to do with things like you didn't agendize things correctly, or you didn't give people the 3 minutes that you should have, been provided, the person should have been provided under the Brown Act. So this is totally apples and oranges. So I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that and corrected some of the statements that were made. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer
Yeah,
them.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, we're in a point in time where we need to bring this community together. We desperately need to bring the community together and act as a whole. What good do you hope to accomplish by this lawsuit? What public good do you hope to accomplish?
I have no comment. Is there any other questions?
Okay, next we have Renee Roth and then Larry Steingold.
Yes, my name is Renee Roth. And thank you, Souza, for your question about what public good could possibly come out of this lawsuit and several other lawsuits that have been filed against the city of Ojai. From the lawsuit, they state, as a result of violations of the Brown Act, the plaintiffs represented by Sabrina Venskis, her law firm, have suffered harm. I would like to say that I have also suffered harm, but am I going to sue the city? Does that make sense for me to do that? I have suffered harm, including a loss of confidence in the integrity of the local legislative process. I sat here and witnessed Matt Summers say in a closed meeting, anything that is said in a closed meeting must stay in a closed meeting. I remember Matt Summers specifically saying that. Anything said in a closed meeting must stay in a closed meeting. Before all of the charade of all the things that were said, I do believe that if you continue to react to and allow these kinds of lawsuits to come before the city and not support your representative elected officials, you are doing harm to the city. You are doing and inflicting more harm by saying you know more than the representatives who've elected our local officials. You need to stand by and support our locally elected officials, and we need to figure out ways to get rid of these lawsuits. I'm sick of them. I'm really sick of them. And we need to bring in cooperation, collaboration, ways to resolve disputes, dispute resolution processes. If Matt Summers hadn't have said that during the meeting, I think there maybe would have been a chance for Leslie Rule to be able to say, Matt, I want to meet with you about this. I have concerns about what Mr. Whitman said during a meeting. I would like to know how to address this. This should not have happened, and it needs to be addressed. But this lawsuit should not be the way to do it.
Thank you, Renee. Next, we have Larry Steingold.
Larry Steingold. The two exceptions that you were given by the DA, right? Those were part of the Brown Act. Mr. Summers, did you have those two exceptions from the Brown Act?
I read them earlier, yes.
Okay, but did you read them prior to the meeting? Did you teach them? You're the attorney, you're the directing force for the city. It is
I sent an email to the entire city
Okay,
council
well-
when they were elected with a variety of Brown Act training materials, which included information on all of the exceptions.
Oh, come on. You were at the meeting. It's your job to stop them from breaking the Brown Act. They should have known the exceptions. They should have known all this. That's your job.
Please. To correct the record, she came in with her own attorney
No,
which
no,
I thought
we're
was
talking-
quite bizarre.
No, no, at the closed meeting. At the closed meeting. When you were there. He's there.
I'm confused right now. Is this a public comment on this?
Yes, on the closed thing, because give it to his errors and omissions account, okay? He can't be a genius on everything. He can't know the Brown Act for everything. That's part of errors and omissions. Let him take care of it, the lawsuit. Okay, because the city attorney is responsible for keeping you people on the straight and narrow. To no fault of your own, you're amateurs.
Well-
Even Mr. Whitman's an amateur, he's an attorney, but he's not an attorney of this.
And just to clarify, Mr. City Attorney and James, if you're listening, I was under the impression that you did exactly that.
They knew
Correct.
the exception.
Can we let him speak, please? Yep.
Yeah, as I understand, Mr. Steingold's asserting the idea of that my responsibility lies in preventing Councilmember Rule from having made her disclosures that for which she was sued in this lawsuit by the members of the public cited earlier. As those will recall from the January
I reserve
24th
my
meeting,
time.
I did so in stating to Ms. Rule not to make the disclosures that she made. She made them anyway. The council then, it was a discussion. A motion was made to allow her to make the disclosures. That motion didn't get a second. The council thereby directed the disclosures not to be made. I attempted to do what I could to protect the city. The discussion regarding the closed sessions themselves, which is not the subject of tonight's meeting, nor is that the subject of the lawsuit. I'm still speaking.
That's the second
As
time
recognized by the
over
mayor,
apology. Sorry. Sorry. Thank you.
as I was recognized by the mayor, the closed sessions themselves, we discussed at length in the last meeting. We wrote a long memo disagreeing in part with the district attorney's assessment of it. And the lawsuit that's been filed against Councilmember Rule in her individual capacity and against Mr. Drucker does not challenge the closed sessions. It challenges the disclosure of the closed sessions, which is something distinct and which I had attempted to prevent on January 24th, albeit unsuccessfully. Thank you.
Do you want to finish?
Yes. I would give it to his insurance company and let them decide. Okay, and you do owe her an apology for the cheap shot earlier about her interrupting, because they're your employers. Employers interrupt, sorry. To the young woman who said everybody was here 40 years, 70 years, 80 years, 100 years, we've only been here 6 years, and I care as much about Ojai as they do. And that's why I'm here. And please record the audio for closed sessions. And the last thing is, this thing is not going to go away. Please be politically astute and solve this problem.
Thank you, Larry. Any comments online, Weston?
No raised hands on Zoom, Mayor.
Okay, we will move on to discussion. Anyone like to begin?
Yeah, I do not see any public good coming out of this lawsuit. I know each one of the individuals who signed on, and it's kind of glaring that they're not here tonight. None of them are here. And I happen to know that they also disagree with many of Leslie Rule, not many, but they are in disagreement with some of her policies on housing. I happen to know that for a fact because I've discussed it with several of them. And I feel like this is, what's the word, retribution. I do not see any public good served by this lawsuit. It's a way to teach, someone a lesson. And I am absolutely, if they will not drop the lawsuit, then I feel as a council, we need to come together and support our duly elected colleague and do the, satisfy the request for indemnification. I feel like that would be a gesture of goodwill. I could cry when I look at this. It's such a waste of our time and so not in the direction that I feel that we want to go to as a council. We need to move forward, learn our lessons, but not go back and keep suing because this will inevitably cost money. It's a waste of money.
This begs the question, Sousa, what do you think about revealing closed session?
What do I think about that?
Yeah.
I first of all, I'm not, okay, I don't feel like that's whatever I feel about what she revealed at first of all, I feel like that all those closed sessions were a complete mess, waste of time, waste of city funds. But
That's not my question.
But my response to your question is that is not a reason to sue Councilmember Rule. Whatever happened in the past is not a reason to sue her now and cause more expense and more division in the community.
Councilmember Whitman?
Yeah, so I don't think that we can agree to indemnify under Government Code 825. The simplest reason is that this code section is part of the Tort Claims Act. And the Tort Claims Act specifically excludes actions for injunctive relief and declaratory relief. Tort Claims Act applies to claims where there's an injury and you're seeking, and the plaintiff is seeking indemnification for an injury. So there's some type of monetary damage, and that person is going to the government wanting to get reimbursement for those damages. And this isn't one of those cases. In fact, there's plenty of, I'm not going to cite legal authority because that would be beyond the point, but there's a Supreme Court case, and there's many, many, many appellate court cases that say that declaratory relief and injunctive relief are not part of the Tort Claims Act. And we're being asked to indemnify her under the Tort Claims Act, and it simply doesn't apply. Part and parcel of that, and going to Mr. Steingold's comment, the city did tender the defense of Councilmember Rule to Carl Warren and Company. And Carl Warren and Company basically came back with a response talking about our insurance policy, and our coverage and our exclusions, and it simply doesn't. Our insurance doesn't apply to the type of conduct and the type of claim that's applied, essentially because it's not a personal injury type of a claim. I disagree 100% with the idea that we would be subject to a lawsuit for our involvement in what the district attorney, his conclusions in that very important distinction, and that is that every step of the way in each of those meetings, we followed the direction of our city attorney and our city manager. I went through this at the last session, but we didn't bring up the idea that we should be talking about the referendum in conjunction with that meeting, but the referendum is tied intimately to the lawsuit that was filed by Simply Ojai, because each of them address the ordinance that was adopted by the city before most of us took our seats. And by the way, that referendum gathered over 600 signatures, which is quite a chunk of the city population. That referendum that you, Council Member Francina, have described as a waste of time. But the fact is they gathered enough signatures that required us legally to go through that process. We were mandated to go through that process that you think is a waste of time.
I don't know that I said the referendum was a waste of time. I said these lawsuits.
It's what we were talking about in the closed session, Souza, that you say was such a waste of time. And in contrast to those more than 600 votes, I know Councilmember Rule wanted to bring up how many, votes that Souza got when we were talking at the last session about, how much deference to give her. Councilmember Rule received 338 votes for her to take her seat. So, if that's a reasonable way to look at people and how we should value them, that we should value the referendum and what the voters wanted us to do.
What's that got to do? I'm not getting the point. I'm not getting the point.
Okay, that's fine. You usually don't.
Wow.
Okay. Councilmember Lang?
Yeah.
I have some more comments to
Okay.
make. I'm
Okay.
going to keep going.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so look, what is, you know, so I hear all this talk about how, you know, we have to come together, but I didn't hear any of that talk during session after session after session of city council that were designed to attack the character of our mayor. And I view what happened and came out of this set of events as just a continuation of that continual attack on our mayor. And I do believe that there's a reason to at least take some pause and look at whether the conduct in disclosing all this information was malicious. There was no reason to go into discussion of conversations with our attorney in which we're attempting to figure out the legal basis for and what the legal consequences are. I'll tell you that I went into those meetings with the idea that I would try to put the city in the best position possible for if the voters were going to vote the referendum down, or in the best position if they were going to vote the referendum up, and whether our vote on the referendum, which was, you know, we were supposed to look at a yes or no vote before sending it to the voters. And I looked at all of those and all of the legal implications and how that would, you know, put our city in the best position to move forward. And I think that's what every one of us attempted to do, but it was viewed as an opportunity to discuss all of what we're trying. I mean, the statement that Councilmember Rule said last time about what she really wanted to get could have been handled in a 1 or 2 paragraph letter, if not a 1 paragraph letter, but we got like 14 pages of like a litany of everything that happened in those meetings. And that was really wrong. So the last thing I'm going to say about, you know, course and scope is that we, in contrast to those who were following the advice of our attorney, we had an attorney very vehemently explaining that this information should not be disclosed and it would be against the law if it was disclosed. What we know from that meeting is that there were members of the public who were told all of these disclosures well in advance. In fact, just last week we had one of Councilmember Rule's supporters talk about the fact that he knew about what happened in closed session because Councilmember Rule told him. That's not how government is supposed to work. And we did have Councilmember Rule ask us after being instructed by council not to disclose the information. She asked us if we would waive our privilege. It's collective. It's the privilege of a body. It's not a one-person privilege. There's no unilateral ability to disclose privilege that's held by this body. And she was not given that permission to disclose the privilege of the body and chose to do it anyways. And any consequences that come from her disclosure are what, you know, she can bear. And, you know, the last thing I can say is, you know, maybe this thing can be resolved very quickly. Talk to the attorney for the plaintiffs about, agreeing to an injunction, agreeing to a statement of declaratory relief that sets forth the facts and the law that happened. And, maybe there's some ability to settle this and put it behind us. But the lawsuit asks for a lot more than a suggestion that, oh, I won't do it again, when everything I hear suggests that there isn't a belief that anything wrong was done. Those are my comments.
Councilmember Lang?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I just have a few things to say. First of all, I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Francina that I'm ready to put this behind us. My heart is broken for the city. And when I first saw this lawsuit, what went through my mind is that these people, the plaintiffs in this case, I'm sorry, I'm really, I get emotional about this, that the plaintiffs in this case must have felt like they had no other choice. I have not spoken with them, so I don't know specifically what led them to take the actions that they did. But I would imagine that it's sitting and watching council meeting after council meeting where the city attorney is telling you not to say things and you're fighting back. And I'm sorry, I don't like being put in this position at all, to be making judgments about my fellow council members. That is not what I signed up for when I ran for office. I signed up to create policy, to do great things for this city, not to be in a fight every other Tuesday. And so, and I'm not putting this all on you, I'm putting this on us as a whole. We need to figure out how to work together. And so I want to just speak to a couple of different things. And first of all, I just want to tell the people of Ojai, I'm sorry. This is not how we should run a city. And I'm angry that we're here being put in this position. And so a couple of things are standing out to me in this conversation. And I came here I came in tonight with really wanting to support you, really wanting all of us to work together. But a couple of things that are standing out in my mind as we're talking is that we've done everything we could to follow our city attorney's guidance, because he ultimately knows more than we do about what is going to protect us, what's going to keep us safe, and what's going to keep us away from lawsuits. And so we've acted within the scope of our employment. But you went outside of that scope of employment to disclose what you did, and in the way you did, which was really harmful. I'm sorry. I don't like being put in this position. And so, the word malicious kind of stands out to me. And I think the word malicious is a pretty horrible word. When I hear it, I'm like, ooh, bad things. You're evil. But the intent to go against the city attorney and the intent to do harm falls under the category of malicious. And so when Anita and others who have spoken to me privately, no one involved in this lawsuit says, this is taxpayers' money. What I think of is the conversation we just had about the budget and cutting community funding, cutting funding for the chamber, cutting funding for Help of Ojai. We're making all of these sacrifices in the budget, and we don't know how much the legal fees are going to be for this. And so one, I think there are a couple options. One is that, and I took some notes just so I wouldn't lose my train of thought. But, one is that we could choose to take no action right now. And then if you continue to pursue the suit and you win on the merits of your case, then you could come back to the council and request reimbursement. And at that time, I would be agreeable to reimburse you if you win on the merits of your case. But
You can't prejudge what you would do.
okay, I might
But you would
consider.
consider.
I would consider that. Correct. Thank you, Councilmember Whitman. But to vote to act and approve your request for indemnification says I'm voting to spend an unknown number of taxpayer dollars for something that I don't think is fair. And I can't, in good conscience, do that.
Okay, I have a few comments, if I could.
Yeah, well, I'd like to, I haven't made a comment, so.
Sorry, this is in response to Rachel, though.
Okay, go ahead.
So, yes, there was never anything malicious. I immediately came under attack from council members directly towards me and felt I had to defend myself. Direct attack. So, believe it or not, there was never anything malicious. It was strictly, I believed that what we did in closed session, number one, I did not believe that everything in closed session has to stay in closed session. That is, if I say I killed somebody, is that private and confidential? No. I know that that's an extreme example, but it is still an example of the dictum that anything said in closed session remains private and confidential. That's clearly not the case. And as far as, I have a different feeling towards the city attorney than everyone here does. I believe that law is interpreted. Now, I do believe that the city attorney interprets the law to protect the city in the way that he thinks protection should happen. What has happened here is this lack of transparency is what has caused this huge discourse, this huge dissent and this horrible stuff, was the lack of transparency. So an attorney's approach, and an attorney who believes that, and I do believe that city attorney believes this, that, the less you can possibly say, the more safe you are. And I do not, and I think you have said this, and I do not believe that to be the case. I really do not. I think that does not work in Ojai. So there was never anything malicious, but I have been the source of attacks from this dais number of times, as has happened, to Sousa just now. And, our first council meeting, I was verbally abused, as was Sousa.
As was Mayor Sticks.
No, I'm talking about, no.
I'm talking about
Please.
our first closed
Please.
session.
Let's no crosstalk. Can you?
I don't know, Andy, if you thought, Rachel, did you feel like the mayor was
The reminder that this is not a conversation.
This is a
You take a
debate.
turn and then I'll
Yeah.
take a turn.
Well, it is a
conversation.
it really should be a conversation. Perhaps, Councilmember Whitman, who just barged in conversation again, and has once again attacked a fellow council member on this dais. He did that innumerable times to me on the dais. He did that the first time I met him in a session. He did that to me. He abused me verbally, and that was malicious. What I have done was only, and it had nothing to do with the mayor. The mayor and I were best friends for 2 days until I realized what was actually going on. I have the text. I have the text, Betsy.
No, but just one second. You can't become best friends in 2 days. We met for 2 hours and
Right,
had a
I'm being-
good
I
conversation.
am being hyperbolic on this. but
Could
we
you
did-
refrain from being hyperbolic and just
Sure,
stick to the
okay.
truth?
We
That'd be
had a
great.
very good relationship for 2 days until we went into closed session, and then we had no relationship. So, and as far as numbers, the suit says that I only won by 17 votes. That is why I have brought up the numbers consistently, is because that's the first thing that it says. Oh, and by the way, she only won by 17 votes. That is why I have brought that up, not for any other reason. And that's, if that is relevant to a suit, right, then Sousa's is relevant to a suit. And finally, I'm going to say, Matt, you did not. And perhaps James, I don't want to bring him in, but you did not say there were two options to disclose. You really did not. And, you can say we had differing understandings, but we also have a differing understanding on what best serves this city. I do not believe that hiding things from the public best serves the city, and I do not believe what happened in closed session fell under a privileged and confidential, and the DA agreed with me. That having been said, we're gonna go to trial. We're going to ask for costs, we're going to win or we're not. And as far as recusing myself, I have no financial interest in this at all. Every bit of the attorney work that has been done has been pro bono. So I will not recuse myself because I have no financial interest in this whatsoever. And as I understand it, you can't force a recusal. I have no financial interest. I have paid nothing, and I will not pay anything.
Well, I do need to ask you then, why did you consistently ask me to recuse when I had no financial?
Well, I'm saying that, and you did, and you said no. I asked you to recuse because I didn't think that you would be impartial, because the people in front of you.
All right, I don't want to get off
friends.
topic. Let's continue with the discussion. Councilmember Lang, and then I'm going to speak after that.
I just had one point of clarification that our city attorney kind of glossed over, and that is that, just for clarification, that when we were all, actually before we were even officially sworn in, we were sent a ton of information about the Brown Act.
Yep.
We were sent a website, the FPCC website, with all of the rules. We were sent packets of information. I still have the packets. And so we did know. We did have the information. And I know it wasn't perhaps communicated verbally, but it was communicated to us.
Just quickly,
you've talked quite a bit.
Yes. But this is on me. This is on me.
But I mean, it's really important to take turns.
What we didn't have were the two options for disclosing. That's what we didn't have. The two. Yep. They're in the information. Okay.
Can we, I would love the city attorney to speak one more time on recusal, because to me, it seems like there's some money involved here.
Well,
not for me.
There can't be indemnification without there being money involved. Otherwise, there's nothing to talk about.
Right. The request is for money to be spent on behalf of Councilmember Rule. My advice is that Councilmember Rule is required to recuse under the Political Reform Act because it comes to her material financial benefit, in that the money would be spent on her behalf. If she elected not, if the council declined indemnity, Councilmember Rule could let a default be taken against her. Generally, you can't get a default in an injunctive relief case, generally, although it's theoretically possible. But it's money that if the city doesn't spend it on your behalf, then it has to be spent. Then either you spend it or you default against the case. So it is money to be spent on your behalf. It's not being spent on any other council member's behalf. Therefore, it, in my advice, is a recusal question. There is one potentially elegant solution, which would be to ask the FPPC for advice on that question. The Fair Political Practices Commission does not enforce the Brown Act. They enforce the Political Reform Act, and they enforce the prohibition on contracts between council members and cities, Government Code Section 1090. They have a formal advice process. We've used it before in the past on conflicts issues. We could certainly do an advice letter request to the FPPC, ask them to advise on the question of Councilmember Rule's ability to vote on the indemnification question, and then see what they say. That would be one option. My advice is that recusal is required. I expect that they would agree, but obviously I would defer to the FPPC if they advise otherwise. And I'm not sure if any requests have been made previously. I know there was some discussion with that in the public discussion. I'm not sure if that was done or not.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I would just first like to say I'm really sorry, Councilmember Rule, that you are in this situation. It's unpleasant for all of us, particularly you, so that, I acknowledge that. That said, you did create this situation. So I think that we need to acknowledge that. And you were told very specifically by the city manager and the city attorney, don't do it. And to speak to Anita Cram's comment, I talked to a lot of people, and everyone I have talked to has said, don't use our taxpayers' money on this. They feel very, very strongly that they should not be paying for this. You went against the advice of the city attorney and the city manager, and you took the advice of a cannabis lawyer. You acted willfully against the city, and you engaged legal counsel to oppose the interests of the city. And this, and do you mind, Sousa? I don't do that when you're talking. And you unlawfully disclosed closed session discussion and attorney-client privileged communication, which violated the Brown Act, putting us, the city, in a potential lawsuit and damaging our position in that lawsuit. So I think that jeopardizes the safety of the city. You hurt the city and you put us in jeopardy. And so I also agree with Marcy Tosher, who wrote in, who's a local attorney, and she said that you made it clear that you prioritized Mr. Drucker's input over the city's attorney, and that you made your own decisions and to retain Mr. Drucker as an attorney of your choosing that is wholly independent from the alleged victim of the lawsuit, the city of Ojai. So because you did make those choices on your own, I don't see how we could rightfully use taxpayers' money to pay for this.
I don't care. When it comes right down to it, we're going to come back to you anyway.
Okay, Sousa.
Okay. I hope that we can take a pause. I want to present another option, okay? We've had about an hour, maybe an hour and a half to air out our grievances, to review the past. The public has heard it ad nauseum. And we can make a different choice at this point. I would say that we can take the high road and, as a council, come together and make a request of Sabrina and the people the plaintiffs that signed on to this, to drop the lawsuit, that we take no action tonight except that we come together as a council and request that she drop the lawsuit. What she does with that request is not in our hands, but that's my very strong recommendation, and I think the public would breathe a collective sigh of relief if we took that higher road. It's really thinking outside the box. It's a different choice.
Is someone ready to put a motion on the table?
I will make that motion.
I'll make a motion that we,
That's my motion. Are you making a counter motion?
yeah, I'll make a counter motion.
Substitute motion.
Substitute motion.
Can he do that without a second?
I don't know.
So the motion that was made by Mayor Pro Tem Francina, is there a second to that?
I'll
And then
second it.
Okay, so second.
Then
Then a substitute motion can be made.
So you're overriding his advice that you.
This is not the same. This is not the same motion. This is a motion to talk to the opposing attorney as a counsel. If he wants to tell me I need to recuse myself, then to me, that's, as a council, we're asking.
Yeah, there's no money involved.
I don't know.
In my motion, there's no
If Matt
money.
wants to tell
Motion
me.
to request the plaintiffs to drop the lawsuit.
Financially benefit.
And there's a second.
It would financially benefit the council member. I would still recommend recusal on anything on this item.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, so that motion dies?
I
with
want to
no
hear
second?
the counter
Okay,
motion
okay.
before I second.
Okay, go ahead, Mr.
So my motion is that we say no at this time. I would say what we say in court, it's without prejudice to bringing it back, but I think as a legal reality, you can make the request for indemnity at any time. There's not like, you ask once and then never happens. I didn't see a showing today that would cause me to say yes, but I wouldn't rule out the possibility of coming forward with better facts or arguments. But at this point, I'd say let's vote no, and without prejudice, and yeah.
Is there a second for that motion? Oh, I will second that motion. Roll call, please.
I'd like discussion. If you're going to do that, why don't you just table it until the end of, I mean, because saying no is making a statement. It is definitely making a statement. And even if you put in without prejudice, you are still making a statement. You could just table the discussion until after the lawsuit is filed. I mean,
There's a technical reason why not to follow that approach, and that is that for you to come back with a request for us to revisit it, you would have to come up with new facts or new law. So
well,
you
it's
could come in.
good to know that. Good to know that. Okay, I still think that's sure. You just can't make the move, can you, Andy? You can't find a way to come together. You have to be who
Well,
you are.
let's refrain from getting personal, please. We have a motion and a second.
It's a pot and a kettle, I think.
Could we
is what we're
have the
talking
roll
about.
call, please, Weston?
Yes,
Quiet,
Mayor.
please.
On this,
Roll call.
on the substitute motion, Mayor Pro Tem Francina,
No.
Mayor Sticks,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitman,
Yes?
Councilmember Lang,
I'm sorry, I have to say no.
You have to do what you have to do.
I'm sorry, yeah. And the reason why is because I think there are too many unknowns.
You don't need the reason.
There's no discussion during the roll call.
Wait a
So,
minute.
wait,
Just to
I'm
clarify,
Wait a minute.
yes on the motion to deny the request? Okay.
Okay, continue, Weston? Is that it?
Councilmember Rule,
Oh, she's,
I advise
Apparently, I don't
Councilor
get to
Rule
vote.
abstain.
Yeah, I don't get to vote.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now, may I
all
ask
right.
a question
Mhm.
of the city attorney?
Yes.
Does this vote that was just taken rule out my recommendation that tonight, everybody, consider what transpired? And I know for a fact if the mayor went to the city, to the attorney and made a case that we should move forward, we have so much to do.
Excuse me, Souza, you do not, how do you know that is a fact? That
Well,
is not a fact. So
okay, I
please
don't know. Okay,
don't say
I
things that are facts that
I
just
suspect-
don't. Well, it's not
I
true.
suspect.
Well, that's not
Okay.
suspicion.
But in any case, if this council wanted to appeal to Sabrina and the plaintiffs, that we, as a community, need to move forward and away from this, and that we've learned our painful lessons, that we can let it go and take the higher road. I believe that if a council, this motion that was just passed does not preclude
Right,
this type of action.
Mayor Pro Tem, you could make that motion and the council could act accordingly.
Absolutely.
Yes,
So,
I would
but
second
the-
that
but the
I
motion.
issue-
wanna,
Yeah.
I wanna raise a question though here, because if we do that as a body, we're interjecting ourselves into a lawsuit that we're not a party to. And so I think each individual council member can communicate with the plaintiffs and/or plaintiffs and/or the plaintiff's attorney and, talk to them about that. But I think the most productive thing would be for the defendant in the lawsuit to talk to the plaintiff attorney in the lawsuit about what injunctive relief and declaratory relief would be a satisfactory resolution of the lawsuit.
I have a question. Is what Councilmember Whitman stated true that we're interjecting ourselves. I don't believe that's true. I believe that we have a right to do that, and my motion stands.
To the extent that that's a question to me, asking a plaintiff to dismiss a lawsuit is interjecting into a lawsuit. The council can, though, do it.
Yes, we
Both
can,
of those
we
are
can
true.
do it, and it's not illegal if we decide that for the greater good, it would be better to put all of this to rest
It's
and
not
move forward.
illegal to ask the plaintiffs to dismiss the suit. We have no power to compel them to do so, though.
Okay.
Well, and as Councilmember Whitman said, we can all do that as individuals.
Correct.
But I believe that it's stronger to do it as a body, and so my motion stands.
Okay, is there a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you.
Okay, roll call, please, Weston.
Quick question, do I have to recuse myself from this?
As stated before, I would recommend yes,
You would recommend?
that you recuse from the motion regarding requesting dismissal of the lawsuit in which you have now denied indemnity request that may return.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please, Weston.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Lang.
Yes.
Mayor Sticks.
No.
Councilmember Whitman.
No?
Mayor Pro Tem Francina.
Yes.
Okay, so it's tied 2-2.
2-2 is no action taken, although the plaintiff's counsel is here, so I would assume they've heard the request from those who voted for it.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, let's move on to item number 5, a request for a new development rental rate disclosure ordinance.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave. I'm not feeling well, thank you.
So I hope you feel better. Okay, and I just wanted to start this by saying that I am super passionate about housing equity and doing everything we can to help renters stay in their homes. And I'm also really passionate that any new development agreement, is everything okay? Do we need to pause or anything? No, keep going. Okay. I'm also super passionate that any new development agreement needs to serve those most in need first and not last. So we need to build homes for people who need them the most. And I'm pro-housing for people who really need it. So I put this on the agenda because I'm concerned that people are misled by some of the words that are commonly used by proponents of new high-rent housing developments, specifically the words workforce, low income, and affordable. These words have been co-opted. For example, a moderate income housing unit costs $3,500 for a family of 4 and still meets the legal definition of affordable. The question, of course, is affordable for whom? So I've had many conversations with people who believe that most or all affordable housing projects will actually provide places to live for local working or retired people at a rate that those with the modest incomes can actually afford. Often, those who are unaware of the complexity of affordable housing rules will express support for a proposed affordable housing development that is based on the commonly understood definition of affordable. What most members of the public do not know is that the legal definition of affordable used in housing law is dramatically different than the definition of affordable, the word affordable that one would find in the common dictionary. So I would like to make it very simple and just direct staff to draft an ordinance for consideration by the council that requires rental rate transparency so that a proposed project's depth of affordability is easily understood by all. The disclosed rental rates of deed-restricted units would reflect the maximum amount of rent allowed based on affordability guidelines in force at that time. Should a proposed project include one or more market rate units, the number and size of the market rate units would be required to be disclosed along with the following statement: these units have no restriction on rents. So it's my intention to increase opportunities for those who live and work in Ojai to be able to become more informed as to whether or not a proposed development agreement is good for Ojai and its citizens. So I'm looking at a simple, no-nonsense disclosure of rental rates of proposed housing developments that would greatly increase transparency. And I really trust that staff could come back with simple proposed language that achieves our rental rate disclosure goals, and the city attorney and I have talked about this. And if we adopt an ordinance, then we can find ways to improve it as time goes on. So any questions?
Are we going to hear from the public?
Yeah,
Have
first we have
discussion.
questions. No
I
questions?
don't have a, I have.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
So, who is the proposed ordinance going to be directed to?
Well, any potential development agreement that comes in front of us.
So this is to a,
So it's a legal way to ask a developer to include this information on any
okay.
written
so it's,
information.
It's not going to create some type of rules about what members of the general public can say about an agreement? It's just going to be
Straight
asked
out,
to-
just numbers. And
Okay, so,
And can I just want to say, the origin of this, it was very interesting during one of our previous discussions with the lawyers from, who are representing the Becker Agreement, because when I asked them how much the rent was, as they were discussing these 67 units, one of the lawyers said he didn't know and he didn't have those numbers, which I think is very challenging for the public to
But that could be the-
let me finish, comprehend when there are no numbers. So that's sort of why I think it would be a very useful and simple thing to do, to help people understand what's going on.
so part of the application process would include a spelling out of the financial basis of referring to the project as affordable and the qualifications under state law that relate to affordability.
Just monthly rent, that's it, basically, monthly rent, because, as we saw, those numbers don't necessarily reflect what we think the word affordable means. Matt, did you?
Yeah, I think part of the idea, as stated by the mayor, is to bridge the gap between the common understanding of the word affordable, little a, which means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And some would define affordable as median income affordable. Others would define affordable as $750, $1,000 per month, something affordable to persons earning minimum wage. The state legal definition of affordable, sort of the capital A affordable, is quite different and includes very low, low, and moderate income units. And moderate income is affordable to persons earning for a single person up to $120,000, which is quite different than someone earning minimum wage, which is roughly $30,000 a year. So as I understand, the goal is to draft an ordinance that bridges the gap between the legal definitions of affordable and the common understanding of the word, so that there's clarity in any communications from a developer.
Well said, thank you. Okay, can we move on to
So
public comment?
Yeah, and I just take it from your comment that you think that this is a achievable.
Yeah, I think it's doable. There's a couple of questions that we'll sort through as we draft it. One is sort of levels of applicability. Commercial rent solicitations, for example, a for rent sign is definitively regulable because it's commercial speech and it's subject to much lower scrutiny. Ballot materials or, intermediate stage would be online things. We have greater ability to regulate because it's still commercial speech, although there are certain federal protections for online speech. And then at the highest level would be ballot materials for any development agreement that might be on a ballot. The First Amendment kicks in for core political speech, but I think there we'll look at the ability to tap into the requirement that most ballot materials still be truthful and not misleading, and looking at that gap between affordability. So if the council directs us to move forward, we'll analyze how much can we go on that spectrum of communications and still stay within the First Amendment's bounds.
Thank you, Matt. And the motivation behind this is simply transparency and to allow the public to know what's going on, the numbers. So let's.
Wait, my question is, and Matt, maybe you answered it, but I'm not sure. When you asked, for example, you cited the Becker lawyer didn't know what the rent or the price of the housing would be. I mean, that could be an honest answer because, you're not, there can't possibly be specific figures in this ordinance because those figures could change. The whole market, the whole world could change. You can't hold people to a specific figure. The houses may not be built for, the whole process takes 4 years or I'm not understanding
So
how this works.
As I understand it, the ordinance wouldn't dictate a dollar amount in the ordinance. Instead, it would dictate that rental solicitations and other documents state the rental rate at which a unit's being proposed. So the ordinance won't have dollar figures in it. It'll require advertising materials, advertising units for rent to state the rental rate, and not just affordable rental, but to state affordable rental, X dollars per month.
Well,
Whatever that figure is at that time of that document.
I feel like you just gave me a very contradictory reply. I'm saying that how can they possibly predict a dollar amount?
By the time they're renting a unit, they have to know what they're renting it for.
Yes, but they can't build without, we're saying that a developer cannot develop property until these questions are answered. Is that what we're saying?
No, this doesn't regulate land use. This regulates information. It's an informational. It's an ordinance regulating what is said in solicitations or what is said in ballot materials. I didn't understand this to be a land use regulation.
Okay, wait. Let me clarify. You're saying, for example, that the Bryant Street project cannot be built unless the developers specify the amount each unit is.
That isn't what I said. That's not what I said.
Okay,
Let me try
then
again.
what did you say?
A future rental solicitation, an advertisement, room for rent, if this ordinance was adopted, as I understand is proposed, has to state the rental rate.
Yes, but I thought Mayor Sticks had a different.
There's a second piece to the ordinance that's proposed. Any materials speaking to a development project in support or opposed, again, subject to the limits on the First Amendment, or ballot materials about a development project that's on a ballot, would have to state, in addition to affordable, what that means in some numeric fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So we won't know, you're right, we won't know what rents are 5-10 years from now. But at the time of the ballot materials being written, we would know what rent is for that year. So, for example, a ballot material could say a project is proposed with 2 affordable units at very low income, deed restricted for 55 years, and for 2024, very low income is X dollars per month. That can be stated as a true fact because we know for that year what it is per month. Now, it would say for 2024, it's, I'm using round numbers, $1,000 per month, with a caveat also stated in there that that's only for that year, and then the future years will be whatever it is when it comes in. That could be done too. Does that answer the question?
I'd like clarity on what Mayor Sticks, what you had in mind. At what point does a developer have to disclose this information?
In the written material that is being, as the project is being proposed. And I'm not a lawyer, and I'm looking forward to our city attorney's work on this, thank you, Matt, to know exactly, this is very uncomplicated. It's basically just asking for numbers so that the public can know actually what's being built. Because, when it says 20 median units, that's still $3,500 a month. And that was the number that I was looking to get from the developer's lawyer. Mm-hmm. And I think that's super helpful for the public to understand
I
a
understand
project.
what you're saying. I have a lot of other comments, but I'll save after that.
I'll just ask a question that I think is getting at what Councilmember Francina is asking, and that is, if a project is very slow to reach fruition, the developer would be able to amend his documents. So if he was proposing some type of rent early in the process and it got bogged down, they'd be able to file new papers, and everything henceforth would be based upon new papers and new numbers.
But that's not the only factor. There's many factors. The whole economy is involved.
I think, but I think part of it is also, for a project that proposes deed restricted affordable units, the idea is that the developer would have to state up front, they already have to state up front what kind of
Yes, I follow. It's
deed
fine.
restricted affordable unit, very low, low, or moderate, to require that to be converted into dollar figures as of that year.
It's actually quite simple. It's just adding the dollar number.
Yeah.
Okay, can we move on to public comment?
Yes.
Okay, first we have Bill Miley and then Larry Steingold. Okay, Larry Steingold.
You people are brilliant. Okay, every layer of regulation that can put a stick in somebody's spokes to get anything done is not such a bad thing, sometimes. Okay, I mean, if you want to stop things, you want to slow things down, you just add regulations, no problem. Truth in advertising, they have to put all the numbers out, all the math. Okay, anybody who wants to rent anything, they have a complex, there's 32 units. Rents are 1,200 to 3,200, includes this, that, and everything else. So you want him, or her, excuse me, anybody, the developer, the enemy, the people locally, whatever you want to call them. You want them to put their rent numbers in the development package, the exact numbers, specifically $1,222.32 for this apartment. And in this town, when it takes a project 32 years to get anything done, why? Because why not? It's a small town, we like it this way, because you want to finesse the whole deal. But at some point, it comes to fruition, and you want him to come back to get reapproved for the same project that he's been approved for, because now he's got to get approved for the math, because the $1,222 apartment is now $2,400 because of inflation, because of one-lane access, because of you've done a great job marketing and the town is wonderful. I mean, this is just another layer. Why? To put a stick in somebody developer's spokes, because that's exactly what you're doing. So I can say, keep up the good work, because that's the motivation. Whether it's the motivation or not, that's the predictable result, is another problem. There are already enough problems. We don't have enough apartments here for people. They're taking apartments out of service. There are people who have a four duplex, and they're turning it into a 2-unit because they can get more and there's less tenants. You've got a duplex over in Golden West that's one person was evicted. Now there are 3 units and he's getting more money. So I mean, we need more places. But I mean, this is just another layer. But I mean, again, be politically astute. If you want to correct things, generate more income. Make it nicer for the residents here. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Well, and I don't see that as an either or. We can do both. And the motivation is simply transparency.
Truth in advertising, I understand. But the predictable result is just another approval of people who aren't here, because you guys may not be here in 10 years when the project does go into fruition and people will go, oh, they approved $1,200. How can that be? We're doubling it at $2,400, maybe.
Well, and just to confirm with the city attorney, I mean, we would update those clearly.
That
right?
doesn't mean you'll approve them.
Well, and I think it's proposed, this wouldn't be another step for approval, it'd be a step for advertising
Right,
disclosure
right,
requirements.
yeah.
Would it be automatic? Would it even have to be approved?
No, it would be a
You guys even have to
requirement, as
look
I
at-
understand it, it's a requirement for the materials to follow, not that the city is getting prior approval on written materials, because that,
So for
wouldn't be able
example,
to
if
do.
you said there were 5 low-income units, you would include the rent.
right,
yeah,
you'd have to
Simple.
state
Just
5
a simple
low-income
number.
units, X dollars per
Simple,
month.
simple number.
But it's just, you know what I'm saying and what I'm implying. Actually, not what I'm implying, what I'm stating, okay? Everybody's done a great job in this valley. And I think it's wonderful. I just don't want you to kill the patient. Thank you.
We'll do our best. Any comments online, Weston?
What about, Mr. Meyer?
Mr. Miley's here.
And we do have one, Mayor. Oh, now 0.
Good evening, Bill Miley. I sent your council and city manager a long email where I commented on sections of the proposed ordinance. I kind of took it apart. Affordable housing income guidelines are published every year by the state for all the counties of California. A new one was just published a couple of weeks ago. All federal and state affordable housing laws and funding frame their support and rules on households not paying more than 30%, as you probably know. They also provide a chart showing rents for each of the 5 income categories. The mayor is concerned about the term affordable housing or affordable being misunderstood. People saying, wow, this is really great. Expressing support for affordable housing in Ojai has not been a problem. She's led the opposition to the Becker development, so far successfully. What about the 5 income levels? Anyone who works in housing, especially affordable housing, knows the levels. It's like a menu in a restaurant. Each item may be priced differently. The big difference is one's household income. That drives the category. What about more lower income units, she said. Too often, she said, they're not offered as part of the project. Each project with deeded units are listed according to the 5 incomes. The number of low and lower income units directly depends on the amount of money available to subsidize the lower income rent to make up for difference in the cost of building and paying for it for the number of deeded years. Do we need this information in an ordinance? I don't think so. Any developer will know exactly what rents can be charged and the income levels needed. The state and federal guidelines used. 55 years is usually the deeded number of years. Our planning department and commission do make clear this is all up when they do this up front with the developer. What about mixed housing? To require developers to show size of their market rate is something they'll do in marketing their product. Requiring it in an ordinance probably is designed to imply there's something wrong with the size of the affordable units. In conclusion, much of this happens through our planning department and planning commission. All affordable housing nonprofit developers do this. There's no need to have a detailed, somewhat oversight ordinance in our small city. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Any comments online, Weston?
No raised hands on Zoom.
Okay, we will move on to discussion. Who'd like to start?
I don't mind.
Okay.
I think as most of you know, I have now been looking for housing for 19 months. Even when I have 6 months rent in advance, I'm trying to get a year rent in advance. There are so many applicants. The competition is so difficult. I just keep trying, and the only way I'm going to find housing is to find housing that's not advertised yet. And so I've been looking at one place now for 6-7 months. You know, the owner hasn't decided what he's going to do, but he has promised me that when he decides if he rents, he's going to call me first. So that has changed my perception, because I am so acutely aware that there are, you know, all the apartments are affordable already. They're the low rent. I mean, if I had known back in December of 2021 what I know now, I would have taken the house back for $4,000 a month, because I've basically lost 19 months of income. And if I had many people move out of Ojai, and I'm sure that when you start looking at the cost of commuting, the 2 hours that people are commuting to work in Ojai, if you factor the time, the cost of the car, the wear and tear on a car, the gasoline, the cost of the air pollution, the cost in health when you start driving for 2 hours to work in Ojai, or you're a worker waiting at the bus in the evening. If you look, you'll see them waiting. And the cost to the school district for not having housing. You cannot. We have 3 schools closing. We need housing for families. It's related to this because you're making it more complicated and more difficult to have housing. I do not see. I agree with the statements made by Mr. Bill Miley and Larry Steingold. You know, there are state and local regulations. We can educate the public about the terms, what the meaning of the terms. We can do that. We can have a handout, a pamphlet that explains those terms. But I'm just very, very concerned about the unintended consequences of another ordinance such as what I think that you're proposing. I'm the first person who would love more low-income development, okay? And to do that, we have to get through all this stuff and partner with nonprofit organizations, and then we can have reasonable standards for those are standards, right, City Attorney? There are standards that the state is already dictating, correct? A developer cannot, the Planning Commission is not going to, I've seen what the Planning Commission goes through. We've had projects on I want to call it the Gables, the land there. There's been so many projects before the Planning Commission, and you never see them again. You just don't see them because it's already so difficult. I do not want to make it more difficult. I want to have, green building standards, the things that we already, I think as a group, agree we can control. I cannot see the Planning Commission approving a project that the town would come out in full force to object to projects that don't have any consideration for affordable units. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but I think that when you talk about housing cost, there are so many things that need to be factored in. It's not just the cost on paper. There's hidden costs. There's costs to the community, especially to the schools. I'm really worried that you're trying to stop a development that's in the wings.
Well, I think that's, once again, conjecture and suspicion. All I want to do is provide some transparency please don't interrupt me, for our community to know how much rent is being charged. It's so simple, very simple. And I would imagine that most people would want our community to know the numbers. It's simple. Okay, Councilmember Whitman?
I got a couple of comments. So I had my concerns about what this was and what it meant, but I'm a little clearer focus tonight. And first of all, my first concern was that there would be some First Amendment issues. But I understand that our city attorney has seen that issue as well, and that he believes it's something that he can tackle within the bounds of the law.
Yep.
And then the other thing is that Council or Mayor Sticks has reminded me that during the Becker Development Agreement, there were people really wanted, there were a lot of people asking questions about these, quote unquote affordable housing units, and we had this body of individuals, 33 different renters at Mallory Way, who were going to have to potentially move into units, and so it was very important to know, replacement units, excuse me. It was very important to know what those income levels were, and I do remember that not only you, Mayor Sticks, but that there were many people from the public, and there were even other council members who were kind of, struggling to understand what affordability level the units that are being proposed were going to be at, so that they could assess how that was going to impact the people who were potentially being displaced. So I think that if the intent, as I understand from the mayor, is that the public would have a clearer understanding of what affordability meant in the context of a specific project, that it's something that I'm very willing to look at. City attorney's attempt to communicate something.
Yeah, we're happy to, and as part of it, we'll assess the bounds of the First Amendment and where the case law lies on that.
So, may I, can I ask a question? Oh. So what happens if if we have these standards and a developer says that he cannot afford to build the project with whatever the required number of low, or, whatever we require? What happens then?
So, first off, this ordinance doesn't set affordability requirements. This ordinance as proposed isn't an inclusionary housing ordinance that would set a minimum amount of affordability requirements. Existing law already sets that. The replacement housing ordinance and or density bonus law already dictates, and the builder's remedy doesn't apply in the city, but if anybody tries, it has certain affordability requirements. Other laws set minimum affordability standards, not this proposal. But to finish the puzzle, we haven't written an ordinance yet, but the council, I think, could set up appropriate enforcement provisions. It would be difficult to have the enforcement provision on a business regulatory ordinance. It would be difficult to have it be that a project is denied if a developer violates the ordinance. Instead, I think it'd be injunctive relief and fines and other requirements about enforcing the truth in advertising, to use the catchphrase.
I'm not quite following. It just seems to me that instead of an ordinance, you could just have a pamphlet that explains all this.
Well, yes, and that's not rent disclosure, because there's no obligation to do that. So, Councilmember Lang, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I think I'm sharing some of Mayor Pro Tem Francina's questions about, about what kind of challenges and hurdles would developers have to go through. So I'm sharing some of your concerns, and I'm also aware of the fact that transparency in these
it's important.
is so important, and especially as Councilmember Whitman mentioned, that the people who are being displaced from any kind of properties right now, that they would want to know what the replacement costs would be, so that they could budget accordingly, or anyone who's moving into town, hoping for workforce housing, they could budget. So I think there's like a practical aspect of this that really does make sense for someone who's looking for a home. And so I'm really torn between the two. I heard what both Mr. Miley and Larry said, and Bill sent that really thorough email today too, which I appreciate. And so, I would say that what we're voting on tonight is just proceeding with doing additional, creating
it's a draft
language,
and an
it's a draft.
analysis.
And to me, it feels like that would be, an analysis and a draft would give us an opportunity to come back and review it and to make a decision before moving forward. So this wouldn't be like, yes, we're going to move forward with this. This is just the next step in the process.
Correct. It'd be a direction to draft an ordinance and an analysis of how it would work and defensibility to then be considered fully.
I would like to go ahead and put a motion on the table to direct staff to draft an ordinance for consideration by the council that would require rental rate transparency.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, please, Weston.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Whitman.
Yes?
Councilmember Lang.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Francina.
Abstain.
Mayor Sticks.
Yes. Okay.
Motion passes.
That motion passes. Thank you very much. All right, let's move on to council member reports. Anybody want to report? Councilmember Lang and I went to the Pride Walk on Sunday. Really incredible event, great turnout. It started 32 years ago with 7 people and a dog, and there were hundreds of people there.
230.
Wow. So it was really beautiful moment of inclusion and diversity and love and peace. So let's keep going along those lines. And I would just like to encourage people to use those words because that will promote peace and love and connection and collaboration. Anything else to report? 4th of July coming up. Paving on July 5th. Woo!
You know,
Yeah. Anything else to report?
I'm a little bit concerned because we did not give staff direction that they should finish their unfinished projects before they start something new. I think it's critical because, for example, the cannabis lounge issue was supposed to be tonight. It did not get on the agenda. I am really worried that we're setting the wrong priorities. I really am. I intended to say that before we finished with that last item. So what is council, what direction are you giving staff if we have unfinished business?
Well, let's wait till we get to the city manager's report. Any more council member reports? Lavender Festival got great feedback on that, so thank you, James and staff, for working on that. People were really happy with the size. Anything else? Nope. Okay, city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. On July 11th, we currently have scheduled for the July 11th council meeting the approval of an interim city manager appointment and an update on the recruitment process, assuming that those go well. And then we have the pavement management plan being brought to the council. That's been a priority item, just getting back to priorities. That one's been on the list for about a year or so. And so we are planning to bring that back to talk about, now that we're paving this year's project, what the 5-year plan is and what streets are being planned for when, which we've started to get questions and comments from the community about. So we want to get in front of those. And so we have those two on the July 11th agenda. The tax options came up today. That's on the list. We're working on it. That one, the challenge really at this point is it's just the research, because what we heard from council was wanting to come back with really a full analysis of every tax option. We could have thrown together a report for a couple of tax options, but if we're going to bring back several, it's going to take some time to do the research and the work. So we are prioritizing that, but it won't be ready by July 11th. And so right now that's what's on the schedule for July 11th at this time. And then other than that, we mentioned the paving update. Like I said, we're working with the contractor. We're looking at that week right after 4th of July, but we've committed to post regular updates to the community on our website and our Facebook pages. So watch there for the latest news and updates on that as that proceeds. So, and that's it for our report today.
Wait a minute. Can I ask, you're saying that the two things on the July 11 agenda are the recruitment and pavement? Those are the two items? Whatever happened to the cannabis lounge item?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's on the list as well. There's a list we gave out back in, January, I think, of 20 plus items that are on the list. So those are on the list. We had talked at that point about having a prioritization discussion, which I would highly recommend, but we just haven't had that discussion yet as a council. So.
Okay, so if we haven't had that discussion, could we maybe have that discussion on July 11th before we get into anything new?
We can. So the challenge for us is that essentially gives us, is it 3 or 4 days to try to write a priority report now. So we can come up with, we can just have basically a 1-page staff report and just have the list and go through that. We won't have time to put together a very thorough staff report on it. But if that works, we could do that on July 11th too.
Okay, so as it stands now, there's just those two items. Because if there's going to be more, I'd like to hear about it now. I don't want any more surprises. Not from you. I'm not saying that to you, James. I'm just saying, are you going to try to make this item that you just brought to council a priority for, or where are we in the scheme of things?
Well, I'll have to defer to the city attorney.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to draft an ordinance in 2 days, so I don't think it'll be coming back on July 11th.
No, and just a reminder that this, I think, has been bumped off the agenda 3 times, so we've been that's a long time.
And that so has the tax, we've been talking, and then
Well, and the
there's
taxes was never, that was never been on the
and
agenda.
then there's the STR ordinance.
And that's never been on the agenda either. So these
I've
are all
asked
new.
for it to be on the agenda.
But you can't just, but the thing is, for things to get on the agenda, there's got to be 2 council members, and we've got to talk about it now. So the thing is, you can't just send out an email and say, I want to do this.
No.
It's got to be.
I'm sure that I brought up the STR ordinance probably even at the first, in one of the early meetings, and I'm certain that someone already seconded it.
Well, you don't know that. You can't just say that. You have to actually go back. Let's move on, though, to future agenda items. So
we are on future agenda
yeah, we
items. Okay, so
Let me jump in here briefly. The council cannot right now prioritize items. You can add things to the agenda to be prioritized in the future. It sounds like what would make sense is a discussion regarding prioritization as itself, a future agenda item. Something quick and dirty on July 11th might make sense.
Okay, and that would include the issues that were brought up tonight about taxing housing. I know that Councilmember Whitman has brought that up several times.
That's on the list, and the council can slot it in the priority as desired.
And I just was going to ask James if we could.
Microphone.
I would be fine with the idea of breaking. Oh, I'm sorry. I would be fine with the idea of breaking up some of those tax proposals, in particular, an increase in the sales tax. My thought, though, is that for each one of these taxes, the more complicated thing than to approve a tax and at what rate is going to be how we're going to earmark. I noticed in your budget discussion that over the course of different taxes that we've adopted, percentages go to different. So, but I'm kind of thinking with sales tax, if that was just a general fund type of a boost, maybe we could go through that really, quickly and get it on the ballot, and then use those real estate-based taxes for those other earmark types of things. It's just a suggestion.
And that's what will come back at the future agenda item when we discuss the taxes.
Yes, and I'm just watching James's facial expressions.
Yeah, all of that's going to come back in the future, not to be discussed tonight in detail.
Okay.
The idea of, if the request was just analysis of sales tax, that actually could be done fairly easy. That one is easy, and that's pretty much, it's routine essentially, from a technical standpoint anyway. The other ones, the vacancy tax, the transfer tax, and Amazon tax, those are ones that are going to take substantial research because they're not common and routine.
I understood that, and so that's why I'm saying, if you could break off the sales tax and get that to us first. I'm not saying necessarily January 11, but the sooner we can get that one, maybe it'd be nice to make progress on putting more money into our coffers.
Yeah.
And then I've got issue number 21 to add to your 20.
Sure.
If anybody else approves of this. I thought that what Steve Colomay sent us in the comments was compelling.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I would vote for it, but I would say I'd like to see an analysis of what that would do to our investment portfolio if we were to divest in fossil fuel type of, I don't really know to what extent we're invested in that, but if we can get that analysis, I would like to see us not have our money in fossil fuels if we can do that.
Mayor, that was brought up with the previous council. I thought we already were doing that.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think I think the council adopted basically a statement that we would strive to do that, which fell short of saying we would not invest in those things. It was basically a goal, not a decision. So the council could revisit that. I think our brief analysis at that point, and Matt's probably going to stop me soon, but the brief analysis at that point was we were such a small city that we don't necessarily get to call the shots on our investments with the banks. The banks, we're limited in how much freedom we have in our investments with the banks when they only give you so many options. So at that time, we had said it would be pretty difficult, but we can take another look at that.
The other key components there is we have a fair amount of money in the LAIF investment fund, which is a state-run investment fund where it's a take it or leave it fund. You put your money in it or you don't. You can't control what happens to the LAIF fund. The second component is we also have to confer with the directly elected treasurer who controls the city's investments, subject to the city's council-adopted investment policy. We can bring back an analysis of all of that for the council's consideration. My suggestion would be to consider having that come back after we see if the legislature adopts SB 252 or not. We'll know the legislature's action by the end of September. Is the deadline. The last deadline to adopt a bill or not adopt a bill is end of September. We might see if the state takes this task on for itself before we come back. Not that we have to kowtow to the state. We can always go above and beyond. But that might make sense in terms of if the state's going to do it, it would create options for us to do it more easily, I'd expect. And that could be a future agenda item with the second.
I would second that, yeah.
Okay. Any other future?
Yeah. I wanted to ask James one question. So next meeting, July 11th, is your last meeting. And so I just wanted to know from you, what do you think are the most important things before we lose you? What are the most important things for us to finish up before you leave?
Thank you. Yeah, and appointing a city manager is pretty important. That's why that one's been bumped to the front of the list. And then for me, selfishly, the pavement management plan, I really did want to get done because I do think it's not popular to make that a priority, but legally it has to be one of our priorities is keeping our streets maintained for the safety of the public. And then it just impacts so many things. So selfishly, I was trying to rush that one because I'd really like to get the 5-year plan set to know that we're going to take care of our streets for the next 5 years to a level we haven't done. And so those were the two that I'm selfishly maybe trying to prioritize. And then, like we said, I think the priority discussion is important. I think if we had it 6 months ago, it might have helped us. And I think it is important to have that. I don't know that we'll have the best priority setting discussion in a short time frame, but I think talking about that will help in the future. So I think those are 3 good items to bring back on the 11th.
Thank you. And can I ask one follow-up question to that? In talking about our pavement management, is it too much to include in that discussion to talk about speed limit change?
Yeah, we could do that, but that's got to be a separate item.
Okay.
But you could request it to be a speed limit item.
Okay, I would request that be a separate item. I think the two are related.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
it might be on
Matt
there.
might remember this even better than I do, but I think we've done a report on that in the past. I think it was, the 20 is plenty?
We did a
Yes,
little
and
while
I
ago.
couldn't get support. But
Yeah,
now
so we
we're-
could kind of
yeah.
brush that off maybe and bring that back. I know there's been some changes in law that we can research in the meantime, but we could try to bring that back as a priority.
Yes.
Don't we need a traffic engineer analysis
No.
and recommendation?
No.
we'll prepare the analysis, but very briefly, state law has reduced that in certain circumstances. You don't necessarily need a traffic engineering analysis in certain circumstances. We'll put that analysis together with some new law passed last year.
Okay.
That
Yeah,
might
and
change
I
the
was
council's
gonna,
decision.
it might be saying too much, but I could say it in one sentence, is the traffic engineer is probably gonna say that it's not justified, but that doesn't mean that the council couldn't say that they want to do it. And that's probably gonna be what the analysis is. So.
Right. There are certain circumstances when state law now allows the council to override the engineers and still adopt a lower speed limit. Certain places, certain rules, certain regs, we'll get you a memo on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, look at other cities that have done it.
Any other items?
Yeah, I have another item, if I may. I don't know quite how to express this, but in order to get grant money for services for, supportive housing for the homeless, we have to involve the city. And so I propose that we create a committee for the purpose of finding out exactly what we need to do. So before we go to staff, that would be a city-sanctioned, temporary committee, so that we can bring back our findings and have staff. Somehow we have to involve staff in order to get grant money from the county.
So we would have to vote on making a committee, but we could put that on the agenda to
I
discuss.
would like that too.
You wanna
Yeah.
second that?
I will second that.
I would like to see us send it to staff for recommendations about how we address housing and, or homelessness.
Yeah.
What are our options, and as opposed to sending it to a committee.
Well, we can prepare. I'm trying to save staff time because we have spent many hours investigating with Dignity Moves in Santa Barbara. We've spoken with the woman in Santa Paula whose name I know. You know her name. Well, anyway, we've spoken with people who've done successful.
Is it Ruth Miller?
No.
She's
the woman
here.
in Santa Paula.
Yeah.
Santa Paula, no, I don't know why I can't think of her
Marcia?
name.
Is it Marcia?
No,
Okay.
no. You know her
Okay.
name. She's
Yeah.
always in the newspaper.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that we've done a lot of outreach. And so maybe we could simply work with staff, but staff doesn't need to start from scratch, because we had a 3-hour workshop on this.
There's a balance between saving staff time and bypassing staff that we need to be. My personal view is that I would want staff to be involved in partnership
We
of
want,
that. and-
that's the whole point. We want staff to be involved, so then we can go to Matt Levere and tell him we've done this groundwork, and what's the next step to apply for grants. So
The council could consider to direct staff to take on homelessness response and unhoused services as an additional task. That'd be a future council agenda item.
yeah, I'd like to get it on the agenda. Yeah.
So with the second, it would be put on the list.
I would second it.
Agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other items?
On the
Yeah,
list.
and we would
I-
call
if-
this support.
I was, if I could quickly, I was trying not to say anything, but I can't help it.
Yeah.
I would say, and I'm trying to choose my words carefully, it's interesting to me that the county is asking the city to come up with a plan to address homelessness for the valley. That seems very strange and backwards to me. And I guess my inclination would be to reach out to the county and find out what their plan is and how Ojai can participate in that. But there's always promise of money that's out there. And I think we've talked about money that's out there dozens of times, and we never get the check that is promised. So I would be hesitant to volunteer to take on responsibility for that for the valley without any funding or any resources to do that, and then to commit staff time to do that. So I think there is more conversation that needs to be had. I'd also say it is the chicken or the egg conversation, because if you're asking staff what to do, there's no direction yet from council of even what direction we want to go in. are we talking, I think the project that, I know that I've heard there's a committee that's working on this. I think that their proposal at this point is to build a homeless facility of some sort. And if you ask staff right now what the city can do, I don't know that that would be the response. It may be, partner with Help of Ojai on programming, for example. So if you ask staff to work on it, we need some direction on what exactly the
Okay,
council
okay,
wants
I can
us
get-
to work on.
What direction to provide would be that future council agenda item. We're going to cut that one off there. You've heard the city manager's comment regarding the issue. Council would need to provide direction for staff to do anything at a future meeting.
Okay,
I would-
I'll try to get clarity from Matt Levere exactly what he is asking for.
And I do need to bring up one more future agenda item, and this is in response to the VC Star article and the quotation from Deputy District Attorney Wold, because I feel like he did not understand our resolution, and I think that we need to rescind it. He said in the VC Star, the City Council met those requirements by acknowledging the violations, pledging to not repeat the violations, and pledging an unconditional commitment to adhere to the Brown Act going forward. The problem with this statement is that there is no violation to repeat. So to me, that didn't make any sense. And, our Berkeley Brown Act professor, Ann Ravel, concurred at our workshop. She was very clear about the facts. So, just to be clear, the resolution says that the City Council did not violate the Brown Act, but then I don't understand how Deputy DA Wold misinterprets our resolution. But that is evident in the quote in the VC Star, and this hurts the council's reputation. This hurts the city's reputation. So I just wanted to bring that up because I don't see how we can. I think we need to rescind it.
So that
I had considered the same motion, so I guess as mayor, you don't need my support, but you have my support.
Okay.
That we need to address the issue. I think I did talk to Matt about this issue, and I think he'll want to weigh in on ways to approach what Mayor, what Tony DA Wold has stated, and I do agree that we need to rebut his statement as what we've agreed to. So,
the council can consider that at a future meeting. My advice is to let the past lie. The DA has accepted the city's prior action as a commitment that prevents him from suing the city over these issues. If we rescind the commitment, then that creates the possibility of further lawsuits, depending on what happens in the future. But none of that is on tonight's agenda. So the mayor can put it on the agenda. The mayor and Councilmember Whitman can put it on the agenda. I would ask future agenda item. There it is, and then it's up to the council.
Well,
But I would ask no further comment on it because it's not on tonight's agenda.
Okay.
Very much so.
it just leaves I think it leaves our options open, and if we decide in the meantime the most expedient way is to let it lie, then we can do that, but we'll also be able to discuss it if we get it on the agenda.
Okay.
I'm not in favor of putting it on the agenda.
We talked all night about listening to our city attorney.
I mean, you can do it.
And so.
My advice is let it lie.
I agree with your advice. People are going to forget that article
I
if
do
they even
too.
read it.
Well, and I think it's also important to remember that 70% of articles in syndicated papers come from a press release, so I'm curious where, the source of that, but we'll never know.
You can write a
Anyway,
letter to the editor.
thank you all. We're finished. Thank you all. Thanks, James, for being there virtually, and
James,
thanks
thank you.
everyone.
Thank
And we are
Already
adjourned.
missed you, James.
And thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief Newman, for hanging in there with us. Appreciate it. Not so busy tonight. We're adjourned.